Bruce, can I get a mic check on you? Give me a second, I didn't hear you. Try now, Bruce.
The guy who was with the architectural firm said that the meeting would be tonight for that. And we could talk to them, and then the next council meeting, which was also this month.
Well, that's not true.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know. They're required to have a community meeting with the neighborhood
Yes.
before they come to us.
Right. Okay.
So before we even get an application, they gotta have it.
Okay.
Not
That's
getting
what
him.
happened. So that's what
And I've tried, I've fixed that, and that what we determined was the last one. Oh,
right now, probably.
try now, Bruce.
Hello, Amy. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
yep, I got you. Perfect, thank you. We'll get started in just a minute.
Awesome.
Is overflow.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Wilmington City Planning Commission meeting to order. Please join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Evans is the Assistant City Attorney. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, you do. Just for procedural purposes, this board normally consists of seven commissioners. Tonight, our chair, J.C. Lyle's out on an excused absence. Mr. Lennon is our vice chair and filling in as chair tonight. But just as a procedural matter, both for the commission and for the audience, a majority vote carries an item. If there's a tie vote, which is possible tonight since there's 6 commissioners, that would be a no vote on that item, just so everyone's aware.
Thank you. And I'm going to read some information prior to getting started. During this meeting, a designated staff person will run the Zoom aspect of the meeting so that each commissioner may be able to focus on the meeting rather than the technology. All Planning Commission members should mute their microphones when they are not speaking, ensure that there's no background noise, and that computer alerts are silenced. If at any time during the meeting a commission member gets disconnected from the meeting will briefly pause to give them time to return to the meeting. All matters requiring commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where planning staff is the applicant, there will only be one presentation. Staff will be limited to 5 minutes to make their presentation and shall make the first presentation. The applicant will be limited to 5 minutes to give their presentation and will present after the staff presentation. To maintain an orderly meeting, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the commission desires to intervene with questions or comments. Public hearings, the chair will open the public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak about an item. Am I supposed to read this now? This part now?
I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
Am I supposed to read this part now?
No, that's fine. You skip that part.
Okay. I'll do it before the public hearing. Okay. So no?
No. Yes, sir.
Thank you. First time. All votes will be roll call votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements read into the record. The chair will call each member by name, and each member should clearly state their vote, aye or nay, one at a time. After votes are cast, the chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. Items receiving a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission will be scheduled for a legislative hearing before the City Council tentatively at the first City Council meeting next month, which I believe is October 4th.
Yes, sir.
Rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the Wilmington City Council. Appeal should be in the form of a letter submitted to the city clerk within 10 days of this hearing. All right. Has the commission reviewed the meeting minutes from July 6th, and are there any comments or corrections? Have a motion for approval?
Move adoption of as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in, we'll do a voice vote on this. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
We'll move to item number 1. So conditional district rezoning, 2916 Market Street and 14 Wayne Drive, approximately 8.84 acres. And I believe Mr. Walton is presenting for staff.
Thank you. I'll now advance the slide. Did the down? Okay, you'll move it. The applicant proposes to rezone the site to MD17 CD, which is high-density, multi-dwelling residential conditional district for a residential development with 112 apartments and 36 townhomes. According to city records, a 62-room hotel has operated at the site since 1956. The subject property has frontage on Market and South 29th Streets, as well as Wayne Drive. This is a regional photo of the site adjacent to several neighborhoods, such as Beaumont area, Beaumont Park, as well as properties north of Market Street, and I believe the Azalea Inn is across the street. Next slide. These are photos of the subject site itself, the Carolinian Inn, that has been in operation, is currently still in operation to this day. Next slide. These are some of the examples of items that will be preserved, including the trees along Market Street, as well as the existing original house, which I believe is original to when all of this was a cow pasture or farm. This house will be donated to the Historic Wilmington Foundation and moved and preserved. Next slide. These are adjacent properties along Market Street. As noted, the Azalea Inn across the street, as well as Indochine across Wayne Drive. Next slide. These are adjacent properties to the south, east, and west, off 29th Street, off Wayne Drive, and Stradley directly to the south. Next slide. The City of Wilmington successfully filed legal action against the property in 2017 based upon a lengthy history of violations of controlled substances on the premise. A copy of that judgment is in your packet tonight as attachment 7. Next slide. The applicant proposes a multi-dwelling residential development of 148 units. One driveway is proposed to be closed on Market Street. Vehicular access would be provided from Market Street, South 29th Street, and Wayne Drive. On August 17, 2022, the Design Adjustment Committee approved a waiver for the proposed private driveway length exceeding 500 linear feet within the site. Next slide. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan identifies the site within a suburban commercial retrofit area of opportunity, an urban mixed-use center along a high-capacity transit route and along a major corridor. The proposed rezoning request would help implement the comp plan by redeveloping an aging, underutilized commercial property along Market, increase density in a location that is both near existing commercial services and along a high-capacity transit route. It would also provide a transition between the commercial development along Market to the existing single-dwelling neighborhoods located to the south, east, and west along Wayne Drive and South 29th Street. Next slide. Based on the analysis contained in the staff report, staff believes the proposed request is consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, is reasonable and in the public interest, and recommends approval of the item subject to the conditions contained in the case summary. The applicant is also here to make a brief presentation. I'll be happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Does the commission have any questions for staff? Commissioner Woodruff.
Jeff, on the slide that's up right now, to start with that, down in the right-hand corner, the connection going into the cul-de-sac on 29th Street, does this property have actual ownership up to the curb of that roundabout?
Yes, sir. South 29th's right-of-way is adjacent to this rear parcel. So they wouldn't have to obtain any further right-of-way to make that connection.
They own the property?
The right-of-way for South 29th Street directly abuts the rear property line.
So they own the property right up to the roundabout?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Just for my own sake, on the history, I know it's O&I is the hotel, R15 is what I call the back lot. Do you know when that became multi-zoned?
The research we've done so far, and I can't remember the exact date, but it appears the rezoning for the hotel occurred in the 40s, and that rezoning was for the hotel half of the property.
What was the zoning when it was rezoned for the hotel?
I want to say it's R1AA, and I can't say what that meant way back in the day, but I believe they went from a mixed-use residential, mostly zoning, to a commercial zoning back in the 40s. But in doing so, the remainder parcel remained whatever it was back then, which was probably some sort of agricultural or residential zone. So back in the 40s, they only rezoned the portion that contained the hotel use that they were trying to build.
And then when did R15 come into existence?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm looking at Brian to see if he knows. I want to say he probably came in when we created the stuff back in '82, I believe.
Yeah, it'd be the 83 zoning ordinance adoption.
So, and I'm assuming that was an administrative change, not a elective by the owner?
They adopted a revised zoning ordinance that, just like what we went through in December, it established a new set of standards for particular zoning districts, and I think that's when the R15 came into existence.
So the two tracts originated as residential?
This entire tract originated as a residence.
The front half got changed to O&I, the back half remained residential.
That's correct.
And now we're going from R15 to MF17,
That's the
high
proposal.
density.
That's a proposal, the rezoning from the commercial half on the front, along with this piece here in the back to MD 17.
All right. The historic house that's there, which zone is that in? The O and I or the R15?
Not sure. Can you move back to the zoning map? No, it's, sorry, it's after all the photos. Let me grab my report.
Go ahead.
So that is in the O and I portion of the site. It's directly abuts Wayne Drive. So where Brian has his pointer is in the O and I zone.
And does the actual delineation between the two, the O and I and the R15, just a continuation of that line going across, or is it?
If Brian will pull up the zoning map, you can see. So you can see in the black line, the northern half is O and I, and the remainder of that is R15.
All right. The requested rezoning covers both tracks, the hotel and the backtrap of MF 17, correct?
The proposed zoning, it's not really, it's split zoned.
Right.
But it's still one parcel.
Right.
So the zoning request tonight covers the entire site, which happens to be split zoned.
Okay, it's
O&I.
split zoned right now, but the interest is to bring it all under MF 17, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Is there any other residential zoning category that's more dense than what's being asked for here?
Is there another zoning district we have on the books that would allow for more density?
Yes.
We have commercial district mixed use. Excuse me, that's not a zoning. We have UMX, which would allow for a mixed use type project of commercial with unlimited density, depending on certain factors. If they were to do, say, a workforce housing sort of component here, they could be allowed up to 36 units per acre. But at the present time, they aren't proposing that, so that's why they're going for the max of 17.
So as I understand, it's 148 units?
Yes.
And as I understand it, that is the absolute max density for this size property and zoning request?
I'm not entirely sure if that's the maximum that's allowed. The applicant can address that, but I haven't run the numbers on that to see if it's maximum.
You don't know what the maximum density could be?
Not off the top of my head, but I can do some math.
All right.
When I get back to my seat.
Okay. In the R15 section, the back part of it, and I didn't see any delineation as to size, but I was guessing maybe 5 acres out of the whole thing. How many under R15 housing units could be placed back there?
Sure. R15 is basically 15,000 square foot lots minimum required, which is usually about 4.4 units per acre. So depending on the acreage of that, it would be the density that would be allowed per acre, but then you need to factor in roads, utilities, sidewalks, street improvements and such. So even though 4.4 would be allowed, once you factor in the infrastructure improvements, it could be less.
Say I've seen numbers maybe in the range of 3.
It could quite possibly, depending on how the road would have to come in off Market connecting to 29th Street, would depend on how many units they could get off of that.
All right. And as I understand it, in this proposal, they've got 36 townhouses in that section,
That's correct.
which if you did 3 units per acre under R15 would only be 15, so it's more than twofold what they want to put back there, correct? All right.
The applicant could possibly address how they design the site in relation to the more dense along Market Street and the reason for the townhome design in the back.
Okay. Under the definitions of MF 17, just some terms, and one of them is that the district is intended to be applied within the urban core of the city. Do you consider this the urban core of the city?
I need to look up that definition. It says the MD district is intended to be applied within the urban core of the city and other areas with a full range of amenities and commercial services. The MD 17 is intended to provide.
Let me stop you. I understand it. I've got it right here in
I
front
was
of me.
just reading it for the group.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, it does say the urban core, but it also talks about a range of amenities and commercial services.
Okay.
And we feel that the commercial that's on Market Street would be the commercial amenity for the site.
And the four corners of that intersection, I think your picture showed, you got the Indochine on one side. You think they need more customers at that restaurant? You're packing them in if this density goes in. There's going to be a whole lot more people there to eat.
You know, I may have to defer to the applicant.
Okay.
Mr. Woodruff, I'm just here to represent what the code says.
I understand. Do you consider this area to be intense urban center with a full range of amenities and commercial services? Is it an intense urban center?
In looking at the services along Market Street as well as the high-capacity transit route, we feel that it meets the intent of that section of the code.
Now, when you say along Market Street, how far up and down Market Street are you going in your consideration of being an intense urban center?
Go back to the aerial.
I don't know if we delineated all the way up and down Market Street what would be an urban intense center, but it is a major road corridor with intense and commercial development along both sides of it. We are within proximity to the 1945 corporate limits, and the intersections to the east are identified as urban mixed-use centers in our comprehensive plan.
Thank you. And in the final phrase of the definition here, it says it's to minimize traffic congestion. Do you believe that's an accurate finding on staff's part with regard to this recommendation, that there's going to be minimizing traffic congestion?
We looked at we considered the use of the hotel or any sort of commercial that could go in the O&I-1 zone portion. And I believe that area is noted in the trip generation section of the staff report. And we feel that the road network as well as Market Street could handle the traffic coming off of the site.
Market Street can handle more traffic?
We feel
Commissioner
that-
Woodruff, can I please interject for a second? Sure. I think what we're getting at there is this is density near services, and this is density along a proposed high capacity transit routes. So those are the things that we're considering when we're saying it minimizes traffic, because you're giving people other options to get their goods and services and to provide alternative transportation options.
So this development is going to provide alternative?
It's located on a high-capacity transit route, and it's located near commercial services is what we try to locate density near services.
But when you said alternative, are you talking about making use of Wayne Drive?
Making use of wave transit, sidewalks, that type of thing for alternative modes of transportation.
Okay. Jeff, one last question. The proposal, as I understand, is on the front end of this, the apartment is a 4-story apartment building. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And is there a height restriction under this zoning?
I believe the height restriction in MD 17 is 96 feet. So they're under what is allowed per code.
All right. But they're also at the max density of 148, we believe, correct?
I think so. I'll do the math when I get back.
All right. Do you know how many 4-story buildings there are on Market Street, say between 17th Street and the College overpass?
I haven't done that research, but I would think the one on 29th Street is, I think that's either 3 or 4, but I'm not entirely sure.
That was 3. I suggest it's the Holiday Inn, which is 2 miles down the road. So that 4-story building is not compatible with anything within a mile of it, correct? If I'm correct, is that correct?
I'm just here to present the facts that you draw your own conclusions.
All right. But a 4-story building at that location is not compatible with anything that you're aware of that's close at hand.
If this board moves to approve the multi-dwelling rezoning, then it would be allowed by right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other commission members have questions?
Yes, I have questions.
Commissioner Pollak?
Excuse me. Amy, can you hear me? Okay. Couple things, Jeff, and please tell me if you answer the question or if the applicant needs to answer.
Sure.
So for sake of brevity here, I was doing the math, and I want to make sure I understand you on your page 4, where you've got the current volumes, the estimated trip generation, et cetera, et cetera. If I look at that and I do the math compared to the table that's on the next page, we would be, the request would be taking a 62-room capacity of some configuration and going to 172 rooms. When you add up the different, the townhouses and all that, I just want to make sure I understand, from a density standpoint, so it's almost a triple density of capacity. Do I have that math correct?
I think so. I
Okay.
think the applicant may want to address that question.
That's fine.
but I
The
think
second
so.
thing that I'd like to ask, and again, whomever needs to address this, is on the traffic, because when I look at how things are laid out, and I marry in the fact that there's reference to a North Carolina Department of Transportation project that will begin in 5 years, and those, who knows when that'll happen, but to construct a median, so that basically if you come out of Wayne trying to go on the market, all you'll ever be able to go is right. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of that project. But here's my point. If you come out of the complex and you turn left onto Wayne, what I would like to hear somebody talk about is when you go down Wayne Drive, there's speed bumps in the road, and obviously, somebody had the foresight before I ever moved here or whatever, that traffic was going to be an issue on that street, and those bumps are there for a reason, not just for aesthetics. My concern that I would like somebody to address is, as traffic starts to naturally start to flow, it could naturally flow down Wayne Drive and intersect down at Colonial by the elementary school. Both Colonial, Forest Hills, and Wayne today are pretty busy streets used as pass-throughs, and I will admit I'm as guilty as anybody else is using Wayne from time to time as a pass-through. But my point being is, if you have 172 rooms that you want to put on this, on this lot, that the applicant wants to put on the lot, that creates a potential density, potential traffic issue, and as it comes together down there by the elementary school, I'm just a little concerned about that, so I'd like somebody to address that with his traffic analysis. The third point is, and Commissioner Woodruff kind of talked to it, where, talked about what is MD-17, what's the definition of all that, and I think the words used in the package talked about this proposed project is a transition, from, I'll say, from commercial to residential. The thing that I'd like somebody to answer, and I guess this would be the applicant, is for me to get my head wrapped around that, to see that statement makes sense, is I know what the homes look like on Wayne, and I know what they look like on Stradley and Renova, et cetera, et cetera. I have nothing in the packet here that tells me what a proposed piece of architecture would look like. So for, I mean, the implication is you could take the homes that are sitting on those streets today and all of a sudden put up 36 townhouses that look like European industrial, 2-3-story buildings. So I need somebody to address that as to how that is a transition into the existing
It's
neighborhood.
definitely been requested by staff of the applicant to provide us elevations, but those have not been forthcoming. So I got to put that on the applicant to address that during the
That's fair.
presentation.
I just want somebody to address it tonight.
Sure.
Okay, that's all I've got right now.
Follow-up question. What other pieces of information has staff asked for that they have not yet received?
The applicant's pretty been forthcoming. The only thing that I'm waiting for on them is our building elevations. And I can't speak for them, but they said that they would have that at some point. I'm not sure if it'll be for this commission or for city council if the item does move forward, but I'll have to default to the applicant on that.
Can I follow up with 2 more questions? I have another question. On page 2 of the staff report, the bottom of the analysis, it says, on August 17th, the Design Adjustment Committee approved...
Mr. Sharp, I'm sorry, can you speak into your microphone a little bit?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall I start over? Okay. On page 2 of the staff report, under analysis, the last bullet, it says, on August 17th, the Design Adjustment Committee approved a design adjustment waiver to the city technical standards and specifications manual for a proposed private driveway length exceeding 500 feet. The approval was based on the site plan that included a driveway connection to Wayne Drive. From our deliberations during the UDO, the 500 foot was an arbitrary amount, but the idea was to keep density and people near the major transportation corridors and to limit these long extensions upon which there was often only one exit and entrance. So why would the design committee add another 499 feet to allow for this in depth of a public, of a private driveway?
So they're allowed to ask for a technical waiver from our technical standards that require I think it's the length of a private driveway cannot exceed 500 feet. I think they were asking for a length of 990 feet for a waiver. And there are a number of factors that were included, including the connections to all the streets and the narrowness of this lot and what they're working with. And I'll have to default to the applicant to discuss their request for that waiver and their justification for it.
So,
I'm just reporting to this
I understand
board
that.
It got approved at the DAC for this waiver, and the applicant will have to address the reasons of why they couldn't design the site and needed the waiver.
Thank you. I'll ask that. But the conclusion is that residents would effectively be walking 990 feet to get to Market Street or Wayne Drive.
Based on this design, yes.
Thank you.
Any other? Commissioner Bowman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, you mentioned before when you were talking to Commissioner Woodruff that the urban mixed use would yield a higher density, but I think the urban mixed use is not allowed at this location because it's outside of the 1946 city corporate limits.
As soon as I said that, I said, nope, that's a legacy district. But yes. Is that on? So as soon as I said that, I said, no, it's a legacy district.
Mr. Walton, let me interrupt you for a second. We're not going to get through tonight with people yelling from the audience. So let's please, if you can't hear, raise your hand and we'll make sure that you can hear.
So the UMX, like you said, outside the 45 is a legacy district.
Jeff, put the microphone up higher.
How about this? So the UMX is a legacy district, and so if they were to do affordable housing here, then you would have the ability to have the 36 units per acre, but they chose not to go down that direction.
Okay, isn't it also possible to do a commercial district mixed use at this site to achieve on the O&I portion is what I'm speaking on, to achieve a higher density and higher height?
They could do it on the O&I portion of the site, but not on the residential portion of the site.
Right. Okay, so, and knowing the liberal nature of the CDMU district, wouldn't it be possible, it seems feasible in some simple arithmetic I did, to achieve the entire density on the O&I portion if using the CDMU use within the O&I current zone without any rezoning required?
It is possible to do that per code. I'll have to default to the applicant as to why they moved forward with this design.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions? I just have a couple. Could you go back to the zoning slide, please? So what's the height limit in O and I?
I think it's 45 feet.
It is 45 feet.
45 feet. Okay, so if the YMCA goes away, that could be a 45-foot tall structure by right.
It could be, and it could be commercial district mixed use, as Mr. Bruce had stated, sorry.
Commissioner Bowman, yes. Okay. What's the height limit in CB?
Commercial business, or community business?
That is 45 as well.
Okay, so a
Yeah.
45-foot structure could be there, but Indochine probably won't go away because everybody's going to walk to it. And just to pick up on what Commissioner Bowman said, now by right, the hotel could get torn down and a 45-foot structure could be built there.
96 foot.
96 foot.
That's-
If the board,
Thank you.
if the board moves forward with rezoning a 96-foot tall by right.
No, as zoned.
No, as
Oh,
zoned.
As zoned, 45 feet.
Right, as
But
zoned.
just on that O and I.
Without any of this process, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Just to clarify, in the O&I district, there is an optional height increase with additional step backs for buildings that go up to 96 feet. So it's 45 feet by right with optional height increases.
So said another way, you could have portions of the building where the YMCA is at 96 feet. Right, without going through any of this process. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, I believe the applicant is here.
Bring it down a lot so you can hear me. Amy Schaefer, good evening. I'm here tonight with the applicant, Orange Capital, Paramount Engineering, specifically Allison Engebretson, Rob Balland, and Brad Schuler, and Reinald Stevenson from Ramey Kemp to talk about any traffic concerns that you have. I would like to thank Mr. Walton for his presentation. A lot of what I have to talk about is very similar, and since we have a time constraint, I'll try to move through that a lot so we can get to the meat of what you all want to talk about, which is what Ms. Engebretson and Mr. Balland are here to talk about. So, how do I, next slide? Arrows. Thank you. Again, just to show here's an elevation. We were really working to get these to staff beforehand and were unable to, but everything else they are, and this is just a proposed illustration at this point. The architects are still working on the specifics. So any advice, thoughts you have are appreciated. Just a quick site overview to talk about those things that Mr. Walton and Mr. Chambers mentioned, how close we are to a lot of the services. There's a CVS, there's the YMCA close by, there's also Planet Fitness and a grocery store right up the road as well. This is our site. A close-up version of the site. As you can see, the property line does come back to the 29th Street right away on that cul-de-sac, Mr. Woodruff, as you asked about. So we do have access to that. And then 29th Street also has direct access to the YMCA between the townhouses and the YMCA property. So the current conditions of the site, these are some of the current conditions on the site right now. The Chapter 19 nuisance order. As Mr. Walton said, the city really, in 2017, spent years working on this. Prostitution, controlled substances, fights, assaults, sexual assaults, and robberies. None of this is now supposed to be happening on the property, right? Well, just since January of 2022, pulling up the WPD website that lists arrests and warrants served, 8 drug overdose calls with 1 drug overdose death, 4 other drug violations, 3 breaking and entering calls, multiple assaults, including assault on a law enforcement officer in August. In August, assault with a deadly weapon, a fugitive arrest warrant was served, and there was a human trafficking charge. So this is still ongoing. As you can see, the subject property is split zoned, as Mr. Walton said. We're close to multifamily medium high as well as CB. These are some more site photographs, and here you can see the historic structure. Across the street is the Azalea Inn. It's my understanding that there is also a contract on that property, and we're hoping for a stoplight, but that's not far enough along yet to know for sure. The residential zoning district, Indasheen, because, you know, we all love it, and the YMCA. So talking about compatibility with the overall neighborhood, right on 29th Street, there's this very large duplex in this first picture, and it's up on a hill. So the elevation is a lot higher. This other building is a little bit more modern. It's under construction on 29th Street, back by the cul-de-sac. These are the townhomes of Octavia, a few of those that would abut our property. And then a few townhomes further up, which are a little more, I will leave it to somebody who knows better than I do what to call that type of architecture and style. A few pictures of Wayne Drive. We are across from Beaumont Park, and the hope is that we will provide a pedestrian connection through the back of our property to the upper right-hand corner picture, which is city-owned property, and then across the street would be Beaumont Park. And with that, I will let you all get to the meat of the matter and ask Ms. Engelbretson if she could come up and talk about the proposed site plan.
While we're waiting, who's our timekeeper tonight?
How much time do we have left?
Not very much.
I don't think we started the time, so I apologize about that, Mr. Chair.
So let's go with 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. So I want to tell you about a few of the things about this site that may have not been exactly covered yet in our presentation. There is the one historic structure that we've already talked about saving, but there is another one. There is one existing right up there at There is one existing at Wayne Drive and Market Street. It is the existing office of the motel, and it will be renovated into an activity club space for this project. And in the rear of the property, Amy just mentioned that pedestrian connection that is seen here in red. That is along that existing creek bed. There's already a desire line. Those of you that know about college campuses and the like, the desire line is the place that people already walk. There is a desire line along that creek bed. People are already walking through the property already. And we believe that they're traveling from the park back through to the YMCA. This is something that has been identified on a comprehensive plan through the city as a desire to develop into a greenway or multimodal trail. So that is our proposal. We also can answer all of your questions about everything that you've asked to date, but if you'll allow me, I'm going to skip through some of those things and talk about some of the other items that you have not asked about, and then circle back at the end and answer your questions. So a few of the things about this project. We have a...
Stay close to the mic.
Thank you. We have a 4-story building in the front of the project. We have a club leasing office that is in the center piece of that area, and we have the surrounding parking and so forth to serve that community. We also share parking with the townhomes in the rear, so the piece that goes between the 4-story building and the townhomes in the rear, parking. Now, part of the reason that we are coming forward tonight with an MD17 is that it allows us to cluster density. It allows us to cluster the density in the front, and it also allows us to cluster the townhome density in the back right here. If you'll notice what we're doing, we have townhomes here against South 29th Street, and then our townhomes are abutting the like use. We are not abutting the single-family residential that is adjacent with any of the buildings there. And to further talk about that, we have a few draft elevations here. We're very much working through what these look like, but I would like to point out, if you'll look at that height, that is 52 feet.
That's time.
This time.
Okay. Would you like me to answer your other questions?
I have a feeling there'll be some, yes. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
My name is Allison Ingebretson with Paramount Engineering.
Okay. One of the first slides that came up when Amy was up there, it was
Yes.
like the second slide, I think it was called existing site conditions. Can we get back to that?
That one?
No, it's a, okay, that'll work.
Okay.
And I asked this before, and it's just the configurations. are
Commissioner
making me
Woodruff,
confused.
if
I'm
you
sorry.
could speak.
I got you.
Thanks.
The cul-de-sac at the end of 29th Street, and you see what I assume is the property line, do not touch. So does your client own property that actually touches that?
I think what you're seeing is that the right-of-way is not typical. So the right-of-way technically touches the site property line. Now, the actual, yes, as you see there with the cursor, the actual pavement is not touching. We will make that connection in the city right-of-way.
Okay, so you have a right to do that. I'm just trying to
We do.
understand, is there some ownership of that land?
Yes.
Because it didn't get developed by the developer of 29th Street?
Yes, it is a city street, and we would go through the process with the city. It is their request that we make that connection, so we are proposing making that connection, and we'll work with traffic engineering on it.
And the other thing you were talking about, possibility in the future of the city fulfilling this pathway to go all the way from 29th Street through your project, through over to Wayne, and then children would cross Wayne to get to the Beaumont Park?
It's part of a citywide comprehensive plan that is looking at greenway connections. Our portion of the site would just be, across this and making the connection so that the city could improve further that and figure out how to cross people safely.
Okay, but my point is you're going to make available to kids to walk over there to get across Wayne Drive to get to this park.
If you'll remember my comment about the Desire Line, people are already doing that now.
All right. Just one, did you participate in the community meetings?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there was 2 of them, correct?
Yes.
In the first meeting, there was presented what I identified as the May 25 conceptual plan.
Okay.
And then on the June 15 meeting, there was a new conceptual plan. It was kind of some revision of location, not density, but locations. On both of those, they had the same density, I think 148, and both of them had the same access points of Wayne Drive and 29th Street. Now, the second one, I understood, it opened up to a full passageway, not just what it was, an emergency something or other, on the 29th, correct?
So the progression, if I can just quickly condense it. So the first one, we had all of the connections that you see on the current plan.
Right.
The second one, we made an emergency access to 29th and kept the Wayne Drive existing access, just improving it to city standards. And then the plan that we took to DAC, we understood from the community that they did not want connection to 29th or to Wayne. So we took a plan that only had a Market Street connection. working with staff, then we're directed through the DAC to make connection.
Well, I don't know, okay. So at the two community meetings, as a result of those, and I think the language in the narrative, if I can put my hand on it real quick, was extreme concern over the access points. And you wrote up in the narrative report, there would not be any access points on Wayne Drive or 29th Street, correct?
That's right. That's the way that we submitted the plans, and then we went through the pre-TRC, and then it was.
That's the way it went after the community meeting.
That's correct.
Did you have any more community meetings after that to announce to the community all these changes that you made to accommodate?
We had the pre-TRC meeting, which is a public meeting, and then we had
But that
the
wasn't an
DAC
issue that wasn't an issue at the TRC meeting.
It was. That was where the comments came from to make the connection. It was a city directive to make those connections.
Well, did they direct you to do it, or was it, they said if you don't do it, you can't do this project?
They made recommendation that we make the 29th Street connection for better interconnectivity, and the Wayne Drive was a strong recommendation and would not receive staff approval for the project if it moved forward without that connection.
So you abandoned the community for the staff's recommendation?
We did, because we also believe it's a better project with interconnectivity, and we have traffic analysis that supports our decisions to do so, and we can bring up the traffic consultant should you want to.
That'll be just fine, thanks. You're familiar with Market Street and Wayne Drive? I mean, I assume you live here in the community?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with those roads?
Yes.
Have you tried to get onto Market Street from Wayne Drive at 5 o'clock in the afternoon?
I have. Not 9 o'clock in the afternoon.
5 o'clock in the afternoon.
5 o'clock, yes, sir, I have.
Try to make a left turn?
I do not make a left turn on Market Street.
Nobody makes a left turn on Market Street.
Right, we all go to lights.
Where are these people that you providing access onto Wayne, providing access over to 29th Street? Where are they going? Where are you putting them other than onto Market Street?
This is a conversation I'm probably not qualified to answer. I really would like our traffic consultant to answer that question if you'd allow me.
If he can answer it, that'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ronald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp Associates.
Good evening. Are you up to answer my question? Or you?
I can. If you want me to start with that, I'll be
I just want the last question. With these access points on Wayne and now on 29th Street, where are those cars going to go?
Well, we think most of the cars are going to go out to Market Street. They're going to make a right-hand turn.
Okay, let me stop.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I don't mean to rude. I mean, it's just, I understand that then. They're going to get out to Market Street. So to get to Market Street, they got to go up Wayne, okay, or they're going to go up 29th Street and take a right. All right. Okay. So that's the ones that want to go east on Market Street. Where does somebody go that wants to go west on Market Street?
They, well, yeah, as you mentioned, there is connectivity. It's my thought is that it's probably better to turn right on Market Street and go down and make a turn at a light. I mean, if you look at the greater area here, there's a lot of connectivity. I mean, this is it's near town, so there are a lot of street connections around. So there are ways to get around to get back west on Market Street. But most people in our traffic counts, we saw the same thing that you were alluding to and Allison was alluding to. Most people take a right-hand turn on Market Street. It's just the easiest thing to do and go down and circle around.
So all these residents are going to make left U-turns on Market Street?
No.
Or turn into something to make a turn to come back?
I didn't say they would do U-turns. I said they would go out and either circle the block or, there are lots of other connections to get back to the west.
What about traffic coming out on the Wayne Drive that's going to the right? Are they not cutting all the way through Beaumont, cutting through Forest Hills, going over speed bumps, reduce speed miles per hour to reduce that kind of traffic?
Are you, I
Take
don't
a
know if-
right onto
quite
Wayne
understood
off
that.
of your access point.
coming out
Out
of
of the
the,
development.
if they were to go down Wayne, yeah, they would have to traverse, speed bumps and those kinds of things if they were to go that direction, which we think very few would do that. There's relatively, I mean, thinking about traffic generated by the entire development is, and I'll try to put it into some kind of perspective, it's about 50% of what we would, is typically the minimum you would have to require a formal traffic study. So it's, as a whole, it's not a huge traffic generator. The development is not. So it's, we're talking about, again, trying to put this in perspective, we're about a little more than 1 trip per minute in the heaviest time. So the highest hour of the day that this site would generate traffic, the very highest time is about a little more than 1 trip per minute.
You know where there's a Forest Hill School just down the street?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever been down there beginning of school or about 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
I am aware that schools are very challenging. Yes, that's correct.
And I say, I'm not trying to be cute with you, but obviously there's a lot of people out
understand.
here that live in that neighborhood and are very concerned about kids, traffic, and you're putting a lot of people on these roads that aren't there now. So, thank you.
Can you maybe, no offense, do a better job explaining what you were trying to say about the number of trips generated? And, because did this meet the criteria for a TIA?
No, sir, it did not.
So, okay, so.
Yes, sir.
So the units requested and the trips related to those units did not trigger a TIA?
Correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
So-
It did not.
Okay, so go ahead and say what you said again. If you would.
So, and we did take a look at this because we were aware that, traffic was a concern. We wanted to make sure we had information and facts to be able to speak to and from on this. And the site, when it's fully developed, would generate a little more than 1 trip per minute. And that would be about half or a little more than half of what the minimum trip generation would be to require a TIA or a full traffic study. So all I was trying to do is kind of put it in perspective that this site overall is a relatively low traffic generator. And I understand that, there are concerns with generating any traffic, but but comparing this to minimum thresholds to do a traffic study, it's not there. And the traffic is far below that this site would generate. And we didn't even really take into account in our numbers, what I think Mr. Walton was alluding to earlier, which is what the site is generating today, with the hotel, on the site today. There is some traffic already there that we would be replacing. So the net new traffic that would be generated by this is even less than 1 trip per minute.
Did you happen to look at, figure out how to say this, if the Carolinian were more occupied for longer periods of time, the traffic that would generate versus this project?
And that's really, I should have clarified that. That's really what we were comparing it to, and what staff compared it to, is if that were more of a typical type, hotel, use there, the traffic that would generate. So yeah, that's really what we compared it to. Yes, sir.
And my last question, if I understood Commissioner Woodruff correctly, or the previous speaker, the original plan conceived everything coming out on Market Street with no access on 29th other than emergency access and no access on Wayne.
Yeah, we actually ran our traffic numbers with a couple of different scenarios, trying to anticipate you know, these kinds of questions. What if we were connected to 29th? What if we connected to Wayne? What if we didn't? So we did look at it kind of both ways there. We think that even with the connections that are proposed, we feel that most of the traffic is going to go out to Market Street with or without the connections.
So my question was more around if, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understood, your original submittal accounted for your primary ingress egress to the project to be direct onto Market Street. Is that right?
I think that's what I heard Allison say, but if we need to clarify that, she can.
Yes, sir. It started with all connections that you see here tonight being on the first plan. Then we took them away as a full access to 29th Street. It was just an emergency service gated access. And then 29th was full service and Market Street. I'm sorry, Wayne was full service and Market Street was full service. And then after the last community meeting, that's when we took everything away except for the Market Street, the one Market Street connection. And then here we are tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners?
Couple questions.
Yes, sir.
More an observation and then a question. On the traffic, as I listened to the discussion here, I put my 43 years of planning hat on, and I get the modeling you've done, and you've said several times, I'm trying to think how you put it, it was, you know, it didn't support a full traffic analysis. I would suggest that you might want to reconsider that position, just based on the level of questions that you're hearing here. Second thing is, in the area of communication, you had 2 community meetings, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. As I've watched this thing, and really where it really hit me was when I watched the tape of the DAC meeting. You had a meeting, number 1. So so if you're not the one to answer to, you know, whomever on your applicant team, you listened to the homeowners, or the assertion is you listened to the homeowners, you made some changes, okay? You came back to a second meeting. Did you communicate those changes to the homeowners? And did the homeowners, you know, express more concerns? And then what did you do with that? Because as an example, from my perspective, the information I've seen, you know, the access to Wayne Drive, you know, it's in, it's out, it's in, it's out. And so when I watched the DAC meeting, I was like, oh my God, it's in, all right? Understand there's a fluidity to this, but that's just a little bit more given the nature of this, because bottom line is you're talking about putting a development in a neighborhood, okay, and neighbors are trying to, it appears are trying to communicate with you, and I'm trying to understand, you know, are you listening or you know, how's that working? So.
I'm going to take the very first one, and then Allison can take the second one about the community meeting and the communication there. The first one, and I may not have been clear earlier, and I apologize if not, we did do a traffic study for this to look at it, even though a full one was not required. We did do a full counts analysis, you know, all that, you know, all that would be required for a traffic study. We went ahead and did it anyway. So we did do that. Yes, sir. We thought it was a good idea too, just like you, to do that.
Because the only reason I bring it up is I keep hearing you say the assumption, and you've said it as well, is the assumption was coming out of that driveway on Wayne, everybody's going to go to Market, and that just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel like that makes sense, okay? Especially if all you can do is go right. I mean, people are either going to go down Wayne, and they're going to cut over to Mercer and go over and pick up Independence. They're going to go find a light. So even if they went down, took a right and went down to the corner and went to Coville, odds are they're probably going to take a right on Coville, come down to, you know, come down on Independence and come back through those streets that we're saying are not going to, or implied are not going to be used. So I'm just really struggling with the conclusions, but it's one man.
Yeah, that's fine. We did send some traffic there, so we recognize some traffic can go there, but, all right, we sure did. Thank you.
Yep.
Reinald also will submit that report in the record, so you can review it in greater detail if you would like to. So your other question, sir, if you could repeat your question. I know you were talking about the community and had we communicated with them.
I mean, you know, the community's right behind you. So the question is, you had one meeting, you know, the assumption that I have is that, you know, people voiced concerns, information was exchanged, adjustments were made. All right? You had a second meeting. Did the second meeting communicate those adjustments?
Yes, sir.
And then were adjustments made subsequent to that?
They were.
Okay, then you took those adjustments and came to the DAC with a request for your variance, right?
We went to pre-TRC first.
Okay. Where I'm going with this is the communication really from that second meeting to today. How, I mean, you know, I believe in the following axiom that says just when you think you've communicated enough, you're not even close.
Right.
All right? So in the dynamic nature that we face here, you know, what really happened after that third or after that second meeting? How was communication back to the group of citizens that are concerned about this?
Certainly. So we set up an email account and advertised that for everyone to email us questions and that we'd be happy to communicate with people through there. Not a single person took advantage of that. Beyond that, they hired an attorney, and that attorney has been having communications with our client's attorney. To answer your other question about were changes made, yes, at each step of the way they were made, and as you mentioned, it is a fluid process, so not only do we have to consider the community, but also have to consider staff, and of course, your recommendations.
Okay, okay for now.
Okay.
John, back to you.
Any other commissioners, questions? Yes. Any other questions? I just have one. Am I remembering correct, was interconnectivity a huge part of the LDC that we just went through?
It was, and it has been. It was part of the last code. It's part of this current code. Yes, interconnectivity is huge.
So it wasn't until the city strongly recommended, i.e. almost required you to have the interconnectivity onto these streets, which are already there, that it became a real issue?
Well, if you'll remember, we originally had all the connections as full service, just as we do today.
But then you took them away in response to the community concerns.
We did. We were trying to be good neighbors and hear what they said, but here we are.
And what is the benefit of interconnectivity?
I could go on a long rant about that, but I won't.
Make it a short one.
Okay. The beauty of interconnectivity is that if there are routes that are cut off in any event, traffic accident, backed up traffic, whatever, there are alternative routes to move through and around that traffic jam. There are other reasons too, and I won't go into the long version of this, but if you're looking at a project site and you have multiple site entrances, that means you have multiple opportunities to disperse the traffic from that project site and therefore not create a clog all the time at the same point. I'll stop there.
Such as putting them all onto Market Street?
Correct.
From one
Correct.
access point. Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we open the public hearing?
Just to follow up on that response, it's to avoid clogging all the people going on to Market Street, right? Isn't that what you just said?
It is certainly one of the advantages is that you'd have multiple routes to get in and out of the site, also multiple routes for emergency services.
So to avoid clogging on Market Street, you're going to send people down Wayne or on 29th Street?
It's an alternative route, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Might I answer a question you all asked of, I believe, Mr. Walton earlier, which had to do with MD zoning? Okay. There is a slide I'm going to point to, the slide right here. So the star is our site. The circle is a half-mile radius. That is typically what we look at when we're planning as a neighborhood. Half-mile from your project sites, a walking distance, reasonable chance to get to goods and services. Within that half-mile, which is represented by the red circle, we have 11 different zoning districts. There are up to 5 project sites that are MD17, the same zoning we're requesting today. As a matter of fact, within Forest Hills, just adjacent to Forest Hills Elementary, there's MD17. It is Forest Hills apartment homes. It's existing. It is there today. It is fully occupied, as I understand it, as of this past weekend, and it operates, to my knowledge, without too much trouble there. So it is one example of a community that is working with MD17 in this area. The other part about MD17 is we chose that zoning district on purpose. We could do an O&I by right district right now with CDMU. We could put 126 units on there. It would be 8 stories tall at 96 feet, and it would have a parking deck to, you know, to park all those people. We could do R15 as it is in the back, and we could add another 15 units to that, so it could be 141 units, nearly the same as what we have. R15 would be allowed to clear all the trees. Not saying they would, but they would be allowed to clear all the trees, and that is not something we're interested in. It would also, for the various code requirements, it would take up more developable area. And so in looking at this site and looking at the options and looking at the surrounding land uses, we chose to put townhomes next to like uses and cluster the density up at Market Street. Make it 4 stories at 52 feet, which is the height of the very next property. It is not 4 stories, but it has a structure on top which is 52 feet high. That is the Forest Hills Lofts. So it is very comparable in that. I'll stop talking now.
When you were talking about the R15, how would you get access to that area? You would have to put on a public street to access it.
Yes, sir. If we did single-family homes back there, we would be required to have a street. It would most likely need to be a public street, in which case it would come from 29th Street. We have approached the city about ability to connect through the open space land there that's right across from Beaumont Park, and that was not met favorably, so it would have to come from 29th Street if the land existed today and was developed as R15. It of course can have interconnectivity from the front piece. Let me be clear about that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pollock?
One follow-up. In one of the site plans that I saw originally, had labeled a car wash. Is the car wash in or out?
It is in. I can show you a graphic that shows you that. All right, so these are buffer graphics in which we're talking about expanded buffers over double what the city requires, and in many times 3 and 4 times. This area over on the right-hand side has a maintenance building and car wash, and shows you the closest home to that, which is not directly behind it. They're offset, but in this graphic, it shows you the proximity.
I'm going to ask a stupid question, so I apologize. I'm going to assume your car wash is just for residents?
Yes, sir. All of the amenities on site are just for these residents.
Okay. Okay, that's good for now.
I do have a couple more questions. Is there currently a stormwater plan in place for either the hotel or the vacant land?
There is no stormwater in place for the current hotel nor for the vacant land. The vacant land is obviously undeveloped, so there is nothing required. And the hotel was built before stormwater regulations were enacted. It was built, I believe, in 1956. So obviously, stormwater regulations came in the 80s, but we can tell you details about our stormwater plan if you would like.
I would.
Okay, I am going to call up our civil engineer, Rob Balland.
Good evening, Rob Balland, professional engineer with Paramount Engineering. As Allison had mentioned, the front portion of the site where the hotel exists, there is no stormwater measures there. Runoff is directly, either goes into Market Street or it enters the rear of the property and kind of goes down to this creek we're talking about running through the rear portion of the site. With the proposed units, we would meet the current city ordinance and the state's requirements. That's a 25-year pre-post storm. What we're looking at now and what we kind of, part of our public meetings, there was issues raised about stormwater in the area, some, localized flooding, so we said we would look at that, try to hold back as much as we possibly could on this site, and that's what we're committed to doing at this point. The ordinance requires us to meet the 25-year. We're looking at higher storms and meeting that with our actual design when we come through. We've looked at the soils out here. The owner had gotten a soil study done. We've done infiltration tests, and we've tried to look at all of our options on the site. Unfortunately, the soils are not conducive to infiltration to meet some of these requirements, so that's an alternative that we're not going to pursue any further. But we will meet all the requirements of the ordinance with this site, typically through a wet detention pond and any other measures that we feel we need to do to meet those requirements.
So granted, they're going to put, if I remember correctly, from the 68 comments I read today, there's 51% of this is going to be impervious?
That is correct.
Okay. But right now, how much stormwater control is in place?
0.
Okay. And so you're going to have a system in place that accommodates the minimum that the city requires of a 25-year, but it's going to exceed that? Is that right?
Yeah, we're looking to, again, we're required to do the 25-year. We believe at this point, based on those impervious numbers, we can do better than that, and that's what we're projecting for.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions for him? Oh, I'm sorry, Rob.
Can we go back to the impervious percentage?
Yes.
So the better design is trying to work on not having an extensive 50% impervious surfaces. Are there other ways to mitigate that runoff other than paving it?
There are. I mean, there's other ways of, you put, it's small areas though, it's not large, fixes to it. And what I mean is where you have like landscape islands, you'll see landscape islands that get depressed, and what that is what they call a little bioretention or rain garden area, and that's where we kind of get some of the quick runoff to go in there. It fills up, and holds that small amount of water. So there's other, what they call disconnected ways we can do that, and that's kind of some things we're looking at as well, just trying to figure out the best way to minimize the impacts on stormwater runoff for this site. So, and all those techniques are in the city's ordinance, and like I said, we're reviewing the ordinance with this site and going to have a plan that obviously at a minimum is going to meet that requirement, but we're hoping to exceed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thanks. All right, we'll start the public hearing. Each side will have 10 minutes. And is there anyone here to speak in favor of the project? Going once, going twice. Is there anyone to speak against the project?
Vice Chair Linden, I'll have the timer.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Gary Shipman. I represent the individuals whose properties are shown here in red, which certainly before the Design Adjustment Committee, the applicant nor staff contested that we have standing to appear in opposition to this application. So the first question that I ask you rhetorically is, what's changed in a year to cause the abandonment of concepts contained in the LDC? When the city announced the change, it announced that for years, thousands of residents of the city, thousands of man and woman hours were spent putting together the Land Development Code. So what has changed in a year that would cause you to completely abandon what this area was designated as under the Land Development Code? Under the Land Development Code, we pose 3 questions. The first of which, is the proposal consistent with the themes and policies of the plan? And the answer is clearly no. The major theme for this area was to develop vacant or underutilized single-family zone sites like the R15 back portion at 2 to 3 units per acre. The proposal says, don't worry about that. Let's put 7+ units an acre on the R15. There was a deliberate designation of this area based upon its designation as a suburban commercial retrofit area. It was designated such because of the purely residential nature of the surrounding areas and the need stated in the plan for appropriate commercial services, to introduce more walkable services, employment opportunities for the surrounding residential areas for commercial uses. The pictures here tell the story in terms of, is the proposal consistent with the themes and policies of the plan? And the answer, again, is clearly no, not for this suburban commercial retrofit area. The current O&I frontage on Market Street is exactly what the plan envisions in connection with the surrounding residential areas. What the applicant proposes to do is to delete all commercial uses of the property, maximize, Mr. Woodruff, maximize the maximum allowed density under the city's Land Development Code, which we contend is a gross departure of the themes and policies of the plan. Look at the suburban commercial retrofit opportunity area. It's clear that as late as August of 2021, the city did not envision that this area would undergo this kind of dramatic change. When we look at what this project is, call it what it is, a 4-story, 112-unit apartment building, 52 feet in height, 36 two-story townhouses, 279 parking spaces, sandwiched between low-density single-family residential development, eliminating 5.3 acres of urban forest and the natural resource interconnectivity, especially in the very sensitive Burnt Mill Creek area. Getting rid of approximately 245 trees in the existing understory. That can't possibly be consistent. We have a copy of this PowerPoint for the record. We have taken all of the provisions, applicable provisions of the policy, and we have compared it with what an MD-17 designation looks like. One of the things that you've got to look at is the policy of promoting safe streets. This is 29th Street with traffic from the YMCA multiple times a day. You can see the width of 29th Street. While you were told by staff that the design committee approved an adjustment on August 17th, what staff didn't tell you is that the order was just entered on September 1st, and we've duly notified city attorney's office that we intend to appeal that quasi-judicial hearing, Mr. Chairman, because the applicant didn't even attempt to put on evidence about consistency with the Land Development Code at that quasi-judicial proceeding, and we read the ordinance as having required that, and we intend to petition for writ of certiorari to Superior Court to appeal that determination. A 900-foot long driveway? Why? Why is that a good idea? It's not. Tonight I have with me Lawrence Green, Weatherall Engineering, 36 years of traffic engineering experience. He's already rendered an opinion and affidavit that the proposed project does not, from a traffic standpoint, advance the purposes expressed in the LDC. It will increase by 2.5 times the site-generated trips during AM, PM peak hours. It will increase by more than 3 times traffic from the site, even assuming maximum capacity from a 62-room hotel. It will increase congestion, exacerbate heavy traffic on Market Street, Wayne Dryden, and 29th Street, and it's therefore inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, whose purpose we have stated. Again, when we look at the comprehensive plan and whether this meets it, one of the issues that we're talking about of consistency is environmental sensitivity. Mr. Lennon, I tender to you Jerry Lindsay with Weatherall Engineering, 40-plus years worth of experience as a hydraulics engineer. He has undertaken a review of the proposed stormwater plan, and he says that this project, the rezoning, will have a significant impact to existing stormwater system downstream that is already close to peak capacity, Mr. Woodruff, for a 2-year event. Designing to a 25-year event, when we design it to a 10-year event, the existing infrastructure in that area will be over capacity, and Mr. Lindsay has opined that it will lead to flood issues. The design of the stormwater pond seems to neglect the water table issues in that area, and the proposed system will require that the storm network work above the water table. Now, I tender both of these gentlemen to you for the commission to ask any questions of them. They're here. They both come from Raleigh, so please take advantage of the opportunity to ask them questions about their opinions. So the question is, what's changed in the last year? And the answer is nothing. Not a thing. But this application. The citizens spent years working on this land development code.
2 minutes.
The conclusion was that this stabilized neighborhood should remain that way. The proposal could not be a further departure from the LDC. It doesn't promote safety. It doesn't promote environmental sensitivity. It places the overwhelming burden on streets that are already overburdened and a stormwater system that is already overburdened. The process is not nearly done. We've got to take through and beyond potentially Superior Court before we'll ever get a decision as to whether or not the applicant in the quasi-judicial hearing that we've already had presented evidence that they were entitled to that variance. We contend that they didn't. And I also don't want you to believe, contrary to the representations made, that this site, if we don't do something with it, it's going to remain a place for prostitutes and crackheads. Please don't assume, especially because of what has happened, don't assume that there are not other opportunities already out there.
1 minute left.
Do something with this site, because there are. The applicant knows that. The applicant has already told you that if you permit this change, they're going to go right across the street and ask for the same density at the Azalea Inn. So it doesn't stop. Mr. Chairman, I would ask, given consistent with the rules of the commission, we've got a number of people that has signed up. I'd ask Latitude if you would permit some of them to speak. Other than that, I would tender these two gentlemen who've come from Raleigh to answer any questions that you might have regarding the traffic issues or the stormwater issues. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman, and thank you for asking if more people could speak after you took the 10 minutes, but I will. Because no one spoke in favor, we will extend the speaking time an additional 10 minutes. So if there's anyone else opposed to the project, 10 minutes starting now.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Murphy Averett. I live at 317 East Renova Circle and have lived at that address for more than 20 years. I'm opposed to the proposed redevelopment and rezoning of 2916 Market Street and 14 Wayne Drive, the Carolinian to MD17. First and foremost, I'm opposed to the proposed redevelopment and rezoning based upon the increased traffic that the development will generate. The applicant indicates that the project will generate 712 additional daily trips. This is down from an earlier estimate that indicated 1,079 additional trips will be generated. Market Street is already overburdened and over capacity, so traffic out of necessity will be forced onto 29th Street, and we all know 29th Street can't accommodate any additional traffic, and onto Wayne Drive. Neither of these streets and the outlets of Mercer, Forest Hills, and Colonial is capable of greater capacity. Every day that I drive down Wayne Drive and Mercer Avenue, children are playing in the streets. Wayne Drive already has speed humps to slow down the traffic. Mercer, Wayne Drive, Stradley, Forest Hills, and Colonial are not equipped to disperse even a minimal increase in traffic. This is especially so when students are being dropped off at Forest Hills Elementary School during peak hours. According to the comprehensive plan, public input, section 1.1, planning themes, one of the main goals of the comprehensive plan was to decrease traffic congestion. This plan calls for 279 parking places. It will not decrease traffic congestion in the neighborhood. Second, the proposed development, as has been discussed, will overburden the already taxed drainage system for the neighborhood. Water regularly backs up on East Renova Circle during a heavy rain. Another goal that was presented in the public input portion of the comprehensive plan was to reduce flooding. As you heard from the engineers, this project is likely to increase the risk of flooding in this neighborhood. Finally, the project is not conducive to the character of the neighborhood. The front portion of the property is currently zoned O&I and has been since the 1940s. The rear portion is zoned R15 and is surrounded primarily by R15 properties. Again, in formulating the comprehensive plan, the public input indicated that it wanted to protect neighborhood character and enhance gateways. This project, as proposed, does neither. It is a 4-story pile of people and a parking lot. It destroys the character of the neighborhood. As the comprehensive plan indicates in section 9.5, neighborhoods count among the city's greatest assets. As I read the Planning Commission website, it indicates that the purpose of the Planning Commission is to make a recommendation based upon the consistency of the request with the intent and purpose of the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan. The proposed rezoning and redevelopment of the Carolinian property is not consistent with the purpose and intent of the Land Development Code or the Comprehensive Plan, and I ask that you recommend that this project and requested rezoning be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak against?
My name is Mary Faye Lindsay. I live in the Octavia community. I live on 29th Street. There's 17 townhomes. They're proposing to connect to our street. So our street is only 18 feet wide. So we don't think we can handle the traffic that is going to come from this development. The high density coming out of there every day, and us trying to even back out of our driveways. We're thinking it's going to be so busy on that street that it's going to cause issues for us. And also, when it rains on that street, it comes bailing down that street. It floods all the way up to our driveways. The water, has nowhere to go. It is so, I've had people on little boats down there at the end because the water is so high and has nowhere to go because the storm system is not equipped to handle that kind of water. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Bradshaw, how much time do we have?
5 minutes, 33 seconds.
Thank you.
My name is Lila Varnum. I'm here on behalf of myself and other kids who live in our neighborhood. We've heard this project will put hundreds more cars per day on our streets. We love riding our bikes and walking to each other's houses. A lot of us also walk home from the bus stop or school, including my brother. And this project makes us concerned for our safety. We already have problems with cars speeding through. We do not want to be hurt or killed by the extra cars this project will put in our neighborhood. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a tough act to follow.
It is. I hate to follow that one. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dixon McLean. I live at 325 West Renova Circle. And I've lived at that location, which is a couple of streets over from this proposed rezoning property, for over 29 years, and I know the character of the neighborhood. And I can tell you that this proposed rezoning, which would change over half of the property from R15 to MD17, does not comport with the character of the neighborhood. I'm not going to get reiterating the details of what you've heard already, which has been a lot of information, but I would like to say that, in my opinion, this proposed rezoning is not consistent with the Land Development Code. It would create undue traffic problems for this area, and it would overwhelm the already outdated downstream stormwater system, which was probably constructed in the 50s when Forest Hills was developed. So I urge you not to approve the proposed rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I want to speak to climate change, which...
Could you say your name and address,
sorry.
please?
My name's Mebane Boyd. I live on Colonial Drive, and next month I will have been in our home for 30 years. I want to emphasize what's been said about the neighborhood, the quality of life that we love where we live. But I want to address global warming. As we speak, 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater. And if we don't start making decisions about global warming in cases like this, we are going to be in trouble. And I am here to just voice my concern over this paving of green space and urge you to vote no on rezoning.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Bradshaw, how much time's left?
2:45.
2:45.
Hello, I'm Laura Hutko. I live at 454 Wayne Drive. Something that hasn't been brought up that I came across. I'm concerned that the proposal doesn't comply with the North Carolina State Building Code Fire Prevention Code. Section D103.4 states that dead-end fire apparatus access roads in excess of 150 feet and 29th Street is approximately 842 feet per measurements from the conditional zoning plans shall be provided with width and turnaround provisions in accordance with table D103.4, and that table indicates that roads between 501 and 750 feet long require a road width of 26 feet in 29th Street. On the site plan seemed to indicate it was 24 feet, but the woman earlier just said it was 18 feet. And for roads over 750 feet, which 29th Street is, special approval is required, and to my knowledge, that approval isn't in place. It may be. But this would render 29th Street unacceptable as a fire apparatus access road. And then section D107.1 states that developments of 1 or 2 family dwellings where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30, and we've talked about this development includes 148 units, shall be provided with 2 separate and approved fire access roads. And then additionally, D107.2 states that where 2 fire apparatus access roads are required, they shall be placed a distance apart equal to not less than 1/2 of the length of the maximum overall diagonal dimensions of the property or area to be served. And I had to think about that a long time. But looking at the site plans, half the diagonal dimension is approximately 590 feet. And the distance from the proposed Market Street access to the Wayne Drive access is only 263 feet approximately. And as described previously, 29th Street is not an acceptable access road, so they don't meet those requirements. So given the above concerns, I believe the development would pose a fire safety risk, particularly for residents of the townhome portion of the development. So another vote for no.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw, is there time for anybody else?
23 seconds.
All right. There being no further speakers, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you to everybody who spoke. Appreciate your time and your commitment to come out to a meeting like this. Commissioners? Commissioner Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by saying what I like about the applicant's proposal. They're going to save the big oak trees. They're going to save the mid-century building. They're trying to save the historic building. And they are bringing stormwater measures to a site that could very well need it, and including the impact of the surrounding community. But what I don't think is consistent with the comprehensive plan is that we take Market Street, named Market Street, and remove what is a commercial zone and any commercial elements on that road. I'm not afraid of density. I've already pointed out that you could do a tall structure in the front and get as many or more units on the front of the property as currently zoned. I don't see any reason to rezone the property. I think that unlike or similar to sites that we've looked at across town, like the Kmart site, for example, as examples of what could happen, I think this is an extraordinary site. You've got a big hill that would allow a multi-story parking deck. You've got driveway connections that could be at the low end and the high end. You could do a podium, 4, 5, 6-story building, and minimize the impervious footprint that would drain to the pond by having parking under the building and not having to have a sea of parking with a car wash and a dumpster pad immediately in the backyards of the neighbors that abut it. So, you know, on the back part of the property, I think it would be perfectly fine to develop as R15. I could even be convinced that maybe single family R10 might be appropriate if you were to look at an alternative. But I think they're going the wrong way with this. I think this needs to be a mixed use site or have some commercial element to it, as we've already laid out in the commercial district mixed use zoning. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowman. Anybody else have any other questions? I did have one other question for the applicant. One of the things that I didn't hear, and keeping in mind we can't keep, one of the things that we didn't hear tonight, but that we ask, is about workforce housing.
Sure. So I'm not sure if I get a rebuttal to the public comment section in the procedure or not, but that was something I had actually thought about mentioning. A lot has been said about what we went back and forth with the neighbors for. Workforce housing does fit in my client's pro forma. It was not suggested. It was asked about multiple times at the community meeting, and so my client decided not to include workforce housing units in response to that. But were we to include workforce housing, one of the comments in the public hearing was about parking spaces. Well, workforce housing also requires less parking spaces. So, you know, if that were to happen, perhaps we could get rid of some of the parking spaces and impervious surface. So, again, it's something that does fit in his project pro forma, but was not included based on some comments that we had at the community meeting that it was not a desired fit. And, you know, consistency with the comprehensive plan, I think we've heard a lot of different things. Mr. Bowman would like to see a 96...
Amy, I'm sorry, can you step just a little bit closer? Thank you.
A 96-story building with structured parking. Planning staff and my clients, planners, think that this does comply with the comprehensive plan. And so that's why we have all of these meetings, so we can get more information. So, you know, I do thank you all for that. But workforce housing does fit, and if that's something that the board would like to see included, we could go back and try to fit that into the project.
Thank you. While you're up here, anybody have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I think, Amy, you just kind of hit on the whole crux of the discussion tonight is you just made the comment on workforce housing, and you said, you know, if that needs to fit, we can go back and look at that. And I think that's one of a long list of things that I've kind of mentally put together tonight is there's a lot of things from a complete plan that I think this project really needs to go look at. I think there are so many, well, what about this, where there's so many disagreements on things that this just doesn't feel like it's completely well thought out. It's an opinion, it's a path forward, but there's too many, one man's opinion, too many exceptions, questions, you know, what about this, what about that I think need to be answered. And I think, you know, Commissioner Bowman was spot on with his comments about the zoning and losing that commercial frontage. So that's the problem I'm having with all of this. So
Commissioner Pollack, respectfully, I'm going to let her respond, but I didn't hear her say that. I heard her say that due to comments from the public meetings that workforce housing was excluded from the pro forma.
No,
that's correct.
but she just said in answer to you, she said, if that needs to be looked at, we can go look at that.
Which is exactly why I asked the question.
Yeah, I understand.
Because we can't require it as a commission.
I got it.
But we certainly can encourage it.
I'm with you 100%. I use that to make the point that I think there's a lot of things from a pure planning standpoint that need to kind of fit together to make this project work better than it is.
Mr. Pollack, if I may have a second to just ask my client, but we would love to hear the comments, concerns of planning board, and if there are changes that you would like to see or more information you would like to have, come back and present that to you. We thought it was a complete and full plan. We thought that the design with the townhouses in the back next to townhouses and then, you know, open space and clustering the intensity at the front, we thought that was a good plan. Staff thought that was a good plan. We got a lot of blue circles. The community did not. It sounds like some of you have concerns, so the more information we can have, the better.
And Amy, I'll just give you an example, and this is just the way I personally work things. We sat here and we had a very good detailed discussion about traffic tonight, and during the meeting we get handed the traffic analysis. This would have been really nice to have prior to this meeting. I also asked a question earlier about, and I can't remember if it was you or who it was too, but we talked about, you know, how this fits in with the, and I'll use the word, the aesthetics of the current neighborhood. And in some of your charts tonight was the first time I've ever seen even kind of a concept of what, you know, the facades of these buildings might look at. That would have been helpful to have, you know, as part of a packet. I don't know, and at this point I don't care who submitted what then.
Sure.
We're here now, and those things were missing as the meeting started. So that's an example of what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Just one thing, if I don't get a rebuttal, I just want to say that if I misspoke, there is a buyer for the Azalea Inn. It is not the applicant here. We have nothing to do with that. I was just made aware of the potential project. So we have no intent of putting more apartments on the Azalea Inn property. That is not what I said and was not the intent. So I did want to clear that. If you'd like me to address some of the other concerns or, our experts, that's.
Mr. Evans, I think I did cheat her out of her.
Typically, we do allow it. It's not specified in our rules, Mr. Chair, but that has been our practice.
Then we shall continue it.
Thank you.
Which means if you had something else to say, please do.
Thank you. I was making notes and just wanted to make sure that nobody else on my team had anything to say, and I think Ms. Engelbrettson's getting ready. I mentioned the workforce housing and the less parking. I mentioned the Azalea Inn. The DAC, I don't know that anything could be built on that back property without an adjustment. It's an arbitrary number, and the DAC committee, who is technical staff, reviewed it and approved it. Where that goes, I don't know that that is the purview of this board, but I do understand that. I do have the order as well, if that's something that you all would like to see, and I'm happy to read you their findings of fact for why they found to allow that variance. Increased traffic and stormwater, I think we discussed that, and Mr. Balland is here to discuss that. There is no stormwater on site right now, and so it can only help to improve, all of the site constraints. Bus stop, the kids mentioned that they walk to the bus stop. We did check on that. Currently, the bus stop closest to our location is at the corner of South 29th Street and Market Street, and that's the New Hanover County bus stop. So the kids could walk down the sidewalk on Market Street, on 29th Street, or there are sidewalks through our project to the front. Climate change and building code, that will all of the building code requirements will have to be dealt with through TRC. Is there anything I missed? Oh, yeah.
There was a detailed explanation of a fire code. I think it may have been misinterpreted. I think to Mr. Lennon's line of questions about interconnectivity.
I'm sorry, you're going to need to speak into the mic more.
Okay,
Thanks.
how about that? All right, so to Mr. Lennon's line of questioning about interconnectivity, that interconnectivity of the site actually helps us meet the fire code. So we are not out of compliance. In fact, we are further in compliance by providing additional connections to 29th and Wayne Drive. And I can answer any number of other questions, but in general, the rebuttal to this is we have 30% open space minimum over and above any required landscape that is in the city's ordinance, and that is allowed because we are asking for this MD 17 zoning district. Again, I'll reiterate, if we went to R15, there would be ability to clear that back site. In fact, it would have to be cleared more than is currently done. And stormwater measures would have to also be put into place and figured out for the front piece as well. To Ms. Schaefer's point, she is correct. If part of the rebuttal about us going to DAC and asking for that 500-800 rule, a variance from the 500-800 rule, there is no development that could happen on the rear of that site that would be compliant with that 500-800 rule. Anything that gets developed back there has to request a variance. End of story, whether it's rezoned or not.
Quick question for maybe you or Mr. Balland, but the impression I got was that an outside engineer looked at fully completed civil engineering plans and stormwater plans?
This is the first we're hearing that there has been a full analysis of anything. We've not been made aware of that, and we have not provided full engineering plans because we do not have them at this point.
So to be clear, you're required to create them to make your project move forward.
We do.
But you have not finished them yet.
Right, so if I can, for just the benefit of anybody that doesn't know the process, I'm not saying you do not.
Please speak loudly.
Okay, what happens with this is we go through a series of submittals. Obviously, we had a community meeting, we did a traffic assessment, figured out that that did not meet a full traffic impact analysis need through the city. We were then allowed to submit to the city for a proposed rezoning, which is our proposal to you. And once we go through this process, if the project is rezoned, it goes through an entire full engineered design site plan, full permitting set, everything gets fully designed at that time. We have done a level of detail sufficient to answer the questions that we have and answers that we have provided this evening, but there is far, far more work that will be done, as is true of any project that goes through a rezoning process.
There was a comment about this, TIA also. Under the current city requirements, were you required to do a TIA?
We were not required to do a TIA to submit to you. This was over and above. Our client wanted to assess the traffic, so he did, prepared this report, and is offering it to you as supplemental evidence here tonight of what has been stated.
So please spare me the reading it right this very minute, but are there off-site improvements?
No off-site improvements are required for this proposal.
So according to this professional study, there are no off-site improvements on city or state roadways that need to be made as a result of this project?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
Nor are you proposing any.
We are not proposing any,
Okay,
no, sir.
so it's not required, and you're not going over and above and proposing it.
The one caveat is that we go through an additional process, as I mentioned, when we go through the full submittal process with the city. The WMPO and NCDOT in this instance, since we will be accessing Market Street, will review this in great detail when we have a driveway design that has all of the grades, all of the pipes, all of that. And at that point, there could be something required of the developer, and he would have to put it in at that time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Just briefly, the board and Mr. Bullock again, if the board would like to see some additional information, we would be happy to go back and work our plan and bring that forward. Please just let us know. I guess we're not requesting a continuance, but if you think it would be helpful to have additional information, we would be willing to keep working on the project.
Thank you. I think, as Chair Lyle says, quite often we need to hear from everybody on this tonight. So who would like to go first before we ask for a recommendation?
Short and sweet. I appreciate the offer of providing more information, but tonight's it, as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of people out here that have done a lot of work, both sides, and what we have in front of us is what we have to deal with. And so when the time comes, it's going to be up or down on this proposal, not something that's going to get corrected, changed, modified, or otherwise. Personally, I'm concerned about just almost every aspect of this. I mean, we don't have all the information, it sounds like. We're getting new information tonight. Obviously, the neighborhood is very concerned. I was concerned about how it went through the community meetings, following the desires, the extreme desires, as I think was reflected in the documentation of the neighborhood. You tried to abide by it, and all of a sudden, it just did a 180, and it's like the neighborhood got left out. I understand why you say you did it. It was to make the project go, but what happened to the neighborhood? That's my personal thoughts.
Commissioner Goins?
Looking at the project as presented versus what could be done.
Into the mic, please.
Sorry, what could be done as it's currently allowable with. I think there's a balance here that was, at least they made an attempt to try to keep the trees and keep with the townhouses and the structure up front away from the houses. I think if they're allowed with the O&I and the R15, they'll cut down all the trees in the back to maximize that property. And then, like has been stated, we'll have a potentially 90-foot building. Is that?
96, I think.
96, which I think compared to a 56-story building, that's a little more out of character with the neighborhood. I mean, I don't think it's a perfect plan, but compared to what could be done, I think it's a good balance.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollock?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I mean, number one, I'm all for development. I mean, we clearly have needs to develop housing in this town, and, I'm not going to go into the various studies that, everybody here on the staff has read over and over and is aware of. From a pure planning standpoint, I think there are pieces that need to be looked at. I think, Ms. Schaefer, and I'm going to paraphrase Amy, if that's all right. I think there's probably time needed to be spent to go back and, tick and tie the different parts of this. So it's kind of hard, right now, to be honest, it's kind of hard to support this as it's been presented tonight. I mean, and as Commissioner Woodruff said, we're only as good as what we have or don't have tonight. So that's kind of my thought.
Commissioner Sharp?
We should never zone based on our fears of what else could come in. I think that this plan has some good aspects to it, but doesn't deal with the community needs. It doesn't deal with the question of affordable housing. It doesn't deal with the question of handicap accessibility. It has school children walking 1,000 foot to get to a public road. It uses an extension of a private driveway that intrudes into single-family development area. And we've talked about ad nauseum about the traffic, but we didn't talk about the environment and the impact it has on the community, and certainly the impact that water, 25-year floods, while it may be the requirement, we're seeing much more than that, and everybody downstream has to care about what happens on this site. I think it's time to go back to the drawing board.
Commissioner Bowman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't think it would take 96 feet to get a comparable number of units on this design, but I'm not the designer. Be that as it may, whether it's 75 foot just under the high-rise code or 96 feet, I think, and even if it's 45 feet, it should have some commercial components. It's Market Street. It's been O&I since the beginning of time. Before our earliest ordinance, it should have a commercial element to it, and it doesn't here. And that's the thing that bothers me the most. Thank you.
Thank you. And for myself, I think this is a lot more about where it is than what it is. And that's really concerning to me, because I will respectfully disagree with Mr. Shipman's assertion that there was a gross departure from the plan. To the contrary, the plan called for areas like this to transition from commercial to residential. Additionally, I don't understand the argument of removing the commercial element, and respectfully, Commissioner Sharp, you got to look at what you can do by right there, because that could be tremendously more impactful to the neighborhood, to the school children, to the traffic, everything else. So to be clear, the YMCA could burn down again, and somebody could build a 96-foot building there that 1,500 people work in tomorrow. So I think you have to take into account what you could do. And I think this is a far less intrusive alternative than what could occur by right there. And I also think if it were somewhere else, this would have been a different discussion. And I think that's too bad, because I think we're losing, it sounds like, an opportunity for a workforce housing component, for a neighborhood that has interconnectivity, and for a developer who, again, respectfully to my peers, I don't think this was a piecemeal application. I think they went above and beyond what the city requires in submitting it. So if we have a problem, it's not with the applicant, it may be with our process. So maybe we need to look at that. What is the will of the commission?
I'm prepared to make a motion if it's appropriate. I move to reject the request, 2916 Market Street and 14 Wayne Drive from O&I and R15 to MD17 conditional use. This request is not consistent with the objective and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The Planning Commission considers its rejection to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposed zoning is not compatible with the surrounding area. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends rejection of this request.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Woodruff and a second by Commissioner Pollock, excuse me. We'll do a voice vote, and just so I'm clear, if you're
Actually,
voting,
you want to do a roll call vote.
that's
I'm
what I
sorry,
meant.
Roll call.
Thank you. That's what I meant. Just to be clear, if you're voting aye, you're voting to reject. Okay? So Commissioner Bowman?
Aye.
Commissioner Goins?
Nay.
Commissioner Lennon votes nay. Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp?
Aye.
And Commissioner Woodruff?
Aye.
So Commissioner Woodruff's motion passes 4-2, and the application is denied. Thank you all very much, and we will take a, We're going to take a 10-minute break. Yeah, I would ask that everybody, when you have your discussions, if you could do that downstairs or outside so we can keep this process rolling. Thank you.
This is just paved. And all of
Commissioner Bowman, if you can hear me, we're going to start in 2 minutes. All right, let's get started in 1 minute, please.
We need to wait on Mr. Chambers. He's providing the staff report, and he has stepped out.
Really? Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order for Planning Commission Agenda Item Number 2, Conditional District Rezoning of 4126 River Road. Mr. Chambers, I believe you'll do the presentation for staff.
This is worse.
Good evening, Vice Chair Lennon, members of the Commission. This site is located on the west side of River Road at the intersection with Independence Boulevard. It's approximately 40 acres in size. It's currently
Brian?
developed.
I'm sorry. Is your mic on?
Is it on? I didn't know you could turn it off.
Okay, that's better. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll start over. This site is located on the west side of River Road at the intersection with Independence Boulevard. It's approximately 40 acres in size. It's currently developed with a dry stack boat storage facility and marina, which is currently not in use. This map shows the site in the context of the surrounding area. Obviously, Crayford River to the west. We have River Lights in the Marina Village to the south, south of Bernards Creek. River's Edge to the east, and then the City Op Center up on River Road to the north. Here are several photos of the subject property as you approach from River Road into the site. Here are some photos looking up and down River Road from the intersection with Independence. And then here's several photos of the second access point, which will be north up towards Coleman Drive on River Road. The site is surrounded by industrial zoning to the north, wetlands and apartments to the east, Bernards Creek and River Lights development to the south, and then the Cateford River to the west. The applicant is proposing to rezone from a light industrial district to an MD17 high-density multiple dwelling district for a 248-unit apartment development. Proposed rezoning, as I mentioned, there are two access points on River Road, one at the intersection of River Road and Independence, and then the other up towards Coleman Drive on River Road. Traffic data indicates that Independence Boulevard in this location is currently operating above its design capacity, and there would be an increase in estimated vehicle trips associated with the proposal when compared to the current use of the site. Based on the intensity and location of the proposed use, a traffic impact analysis was required and was completed, and the approval letter was dated August 29th, and that's included as attachment 7 in your report. It includes improvements to both the intersection of Independence at Access 1 and the proposed driveway on River Road near Coleman Drive at Access 2. The TIA identifies a single-lane roundabout with a northbound right turn bypass lane at the intersection of Independence Boulevard and River Road. And then the new driveway at Access 2 would include new stop controls on River Road. The proposal would result in a net decrease in impervious coverage for the site. The proposed impervious coverage would be less than 25%. The minimum parking required for this proposed development is 372 off-street spaces. The maximum parking allowed would be 682. The applicant's proposing 439. There would also be a minimum of 30 bicycle parking spaces required. The site is located within a live-work innovation zone area of opportunity and along a major road corridor and high-capacity transit route. The proposed rezoning includes multiple connections to the existing road network and a needed transportation improvement at a heavily traveled intersection. The proposal would result in a reduction in impervious coverage and overall stormwater volume in an environmentally sensitive area, and it would allow for an increase in residential density along an identified high-capacity transit route and major road corridor. Staff believes that this request is reasonable and consistent with our comprehensive plan. We are recommending conditional approval subject to the conditions included in the report. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Any questions from members of the commission? Mr. Woodruff?
Brian, on this, the traffic control, the roundabout, and then at the north end, am I right? And I just don't recall when we did the last one with River Lights, but it says that's what we agreed with, that River Lights, upon completion of construction, basically, or 10 years, would put in this traffic control that was recommended.
That's included in their current development agreement, yes, sir.
But by this request tonight, that very same changes is being imposed on the applicant, correct?
It's required based on the impact, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
To follow that up, the package says 2,290th residential dwelling or 10 years from January 5th of 21. Was that the original? They've been building a lot longer than 21.
Well, there's been multiple amendments to that agreement over time, yes.
Which way?
I'm not sure I follow.
Up or down, long, short? So to get to 2,290, was that always the number to trigger their offsites?
I believe that 2290 was, I have to go back and look at the original. I don't think I have that information. I know that 2290's been in there for a while, but they've added exchange calculations in there where they could take commercial square footage and add more units. And then they increased the overall cap of residential to, I believe, like 3,500. I don't know for certain if 2290 was always the trigger.
But the TIA that the applicant had done suggested these improvements?
There's a lot of interesting history with this traffic impact analysis. The original analysis was done prior to the city annexing the property, I believe. Tonight we have Dennis Vilenowitz, our city traffic engineer, is here. He'd probably be better equipped to answer TIA questions and traffic questions. I probably know enough just to get myself in trouble and probably confuse you guys. So there's a lot of history with that traffic impact analysis for sure.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sharp, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I'll wait.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant is here.
Good evening. My name's Mike Brown. I live at 1922 Brookhaven Road, Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm a partner with the applicant, Cape Fear Development, and I'm joined here tonight by Brian Eckel, Vin Wells, and Bill Shuttlecotty, who are also partners in this development group. We're a sister company of Cape Fear Commercial, who recently this month celebrated our 21st anniversary of business here in Wilmington, North Carolina. We employ over 30 individuals. And I'm joined tonight by a talented team of local professionals who I'll briefly introduce. Brian Ensign with TC Squared Engineering is here. He's our civil engineer. Josh Mahaley with Mahaley Land Design is our land planning and landscape architecture consultant. Jonathan Guy with Kimley Horn, who is our traffic engineer, is here and available. Lizzie Daniel with LS3P is our architect, and then Sam Frank with Warden Smith. And all of them will be available to answer any questions you may have. By way of brief introduction to the work this team's completed together, here's a sampling of projects we've worked on together in the region. As you'll see, we strive to differentiate our projects by focusing on the details and by continuously trying to elevate the level of design and the level of quality. We want each of our projects to be unique and have a sense of place, and we try to work very hard to do that, and I think we've been successful and are very proud of our work in the local market. In preparation for the application, we conducted 3 neighborhood meetings so we could discuss the proposed rezoning and development plan with our neighbors. There was light attendance. We had 2 at the first meeting, 1 individual at the second meeting, and then a single individual at the third meeting. As summarized in the report, the limited response to our invitations reflected a general appreciation of our effort to develop an important site that has been underutilized for too long. As outlined in the staff report and the agenda package, our project represents the redevelopment of the former Watermark Marina property. This property was originally developed by prior ownership in 2006 with a marina and large dry stack storage facility. Regrettably, there was no deepwater access available to the site, which is a pretty critical component for a dry stack marina facility, so it has been non-functional since it was constructed. We are proposing a conditional rezoning from light industrial to moderate high density multiple dwelling residential MD17, which will provide an opportunity for the revitalization of this important site in the city that has been underutilized for the last 15 years. The proposed project consists of 2 4-story multifamily dwelling units with 248 units, supported by green space and amenities and 434 parking spaces. As reinforced in the staff report, a multifamily development will provide much needed housing to meet the demand of the growing local population. The project will increase the diversity of housing operations within the city and support the growth that is coming to the area. This redevelopment we are proposing represents a net decrease in pervious areas compared to the current development on site. The addition of activated green space within the project accessible to the community residents, along with a nice pool amenity, the reuse of existing stormwater pond and existing stormwater permit, preservation of the adjacent undeveloped wetlands and existing buffers, connectivity to River Road on both the northern and eastern side of the site as outlined by staff, bike storage and bicycle/pedestrian connectivity within the site and also along the project's frontage on River Road, reuse of the existing pier structure, which will prove to be a very unique amenity to future residents and provide access to the Cape Fear River for kayaking and such. Consistent with the summary in your staff report and Mr. Chambers' explanation, this conditional rezoning is consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. A multifamily development will provide much needed housing to meet the demand of an exponentially growing population, and the project will increase the density of housing options within the city, which is much needed. I've included a survey for your reference which shows the current improvements along with the buffer areas and creek to the south. And I've also included an aerial with the site plan inlaid in it, which staff did as well, which is a helpful reference to show our separation from neighboring uses. Finally, the project timeline, we're before you here tonight. We hope to have a successful outcome and be before the City Council, first meeting in October. We'll then complete our TRC design. We've already done pre-TRC. We'll complete our pre-TRC design, permitting, and engineering. And we usually go and meet back with the community to share kind of what we've come up with, any updates or anything like that. And then we'll proceed with construction. And it's about an 18-month construction time frame. So starting today, probably about 24 months out. And our project team, as I've mentioned, is here to address any questions you might have. Also, if it pleases the chair, after the public comment period, if we could have the opportunity to address any public comments, we would appreciate that very much. And with that,
I'll remember to do that this time.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. We appreciate y'all's consideration.
Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Bowman, you good? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, this time we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the project? Going once. Okay. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the project? Come on up. Please tell us your name and where you live.
My name is Patricia Kemp, and I live on River Road on River Lights. I'm really not opposed so much to the development as I'm wondering what kind of traffic study has been done. I moved to the River Lights area 4 years ago, and as you well know, this is probably the fastest growing one of the fastest growing areas in Wilmington, and I've seen the traffic it's horrendous there right now. And the intersection of Independence and River Road, and this will be Watermark, will continue on. That will be a horrible intersection if there isn't some traffic light there or some better traffic studies than there are right now, because right now it can be it can be a real log jam of traffic. So I'm hoping that the Planning Commission has really studied the traffic implications of this development before they go ahead and zone it as residential. I'm not opposed to any kind of development. I'm just opposed to the traffic problems that it's going to cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Chuck Omek. I'm the owner of Four Seasons Demolition, and my property is directly next door at 4004 River Road. We are a heavy equipment company. We have a lot of tractor trailers. My neighbor closest to them, which I guess would be south, which is up against their property line, that is Mike Hobbs, who owns East Coast Construction. He is also a heavy equipment company. Across the easement, I failed to mention that I am on the easement, which would be their secondary access road. On the other side of that easement is Chestnut Enterprises, and they are a bonded warehouse. Constantly, all day long, a lot of heavy truck traffic, tractor trailer traffic. At any given time, there are tractor trailers stopped on the easement road, on the sides of the road, in the road, because it's an easement. There's no traffic other than our traffic on there. So I'm not opposed to the project, but I am concerned about the easement road. I'd like to know what their intentions are with that, how they're going to improve it. I spoke with Brian Eccles about this, and he says that it's going to be sort of an emergency fire department entrance exit, and there'll possibly be a gate there that would allow for the fire department to use it in case of emergency. So if it were to be used for smaller vehicular traffic, I feel like there would be a major concern of the mixture of cars and big trucks on that road. At the intersection of River Road and the easement road is also another entrance, which is Waste Industries. And the road meets River Road on a particular angle that makes it extremely difficult and dangerous to pull out onto River Road. It's difficult to describe, but it's when you pull up to River Road, there is a definite blind spot. It's very difficult to see because of the angle that they meet at. But other than that, I have no issue with the project at all, and sounds like they're going to improve the traffic plan, if anything.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition? How are we doing on time?
5.5 minutes.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Ganger, and I live in a development right off of River Road as well. And my concern is that same corner of Independence Road and River Road. The traffic right now is very difficult. It's just a four-way stop, and with all the additional people that will be living in this development, a four-way stop isn't going to cut it. But the other issue that no one's brought up is the water. So anytime there are heavy rains, and in Wilmington there are heavy rains a lot, that particular four-way stop is underwater. So I haven't heard anything about what we're going to do with any extra water from Impervious Services. So I'd like to hear about that, and I'm worried about that because at any given time we could become an island out there with very little access out off of River Road.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody else to speak in opposition? All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing, and I will ask the applicant to come back up for rebuttal. Or clarification, it's probably a better word.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name's Sam Frank. I'm an attorney. I represent the developer applicant. Let me speak first to the comments you heard during the public hearing, and then also offer our traffic engineer, Jonathan Guy, who's here, who may be able to provide more color and information on the topic that you discussed before our presentation. Mr. Womack spoke about access over a road. I want to make it clear that the road that he's describing is land that the applicant owns in fee simple. Other parties have an easement right to utilize it as an access way, but only an easement right to utilize it as an access way. So as you might imagine, we take exception to the notion that we wouldn't be free to also utilize the land that we own. The traffic improvements that Ms. Inger and Ms. Kellen referred to are pending. As you know, that's part of River Light's agreement with the city, is that they'll install those improvements in the future. The condition that's been proposed by staff is the one that you typically see, which is we will comply with the recommendations of the TIA. In this case, the TIA recommends that we install improvements that are already contemplated to be installed by another. That's an awkward scenario. And for that reason, as I suggested, I think I'd like to give Mr. Guy a chance to talk to you, answer questions about the history of that TIA, so that you have all the information you need to decide how to handle that condition. Finally, with regard to drainage and stormwater, as Ms. Inger raised, first and foremost, the proposed development will decrease the level of impervious surface on the site. We will rely on the existing stormwater management permit, and of course, the site will be engineered to satisfy both the city's current code requirements and the terms of that existing stormwater management permit. Our civil engineer is here this evening. If you have further questions about drainage, I'd be pleased to provide him to you to answer those questions. With that said, would you like me to invite the traffic engineer here?
Thank you. I think you may have a question.
Sure thing.
Just real quick, Sam. I'm just curious, what's the history behind that, the stretch that goes to the northern entrance? I mean, it's an odd configuration.
I may be able to get a better picture on the screen. Can you help us with an image that shows the entirety? That's fine.
There you go.
That shows the entirety of the site. And so I can talk about the boundary of the site. I can't tell you from an educated basis about the history of how it was assembled. Is that
Well,
the nature of your question?
it's odd. I mean, they got all this frontage on River Road, and yet there's this chute going off, and they hold it in, you said fee simple, so I'm just wondering why. I mean, what's, and I'm getting around to, and not that you would be deprived of it, but is that a necessary aspect of this project? I mean, do you have to have access going out that way or in that way?
That is the secondary access to the site, and by the city's code requirements, we're expected to provide a second point of access. And so the design deliberately includes it. Our land planner, Josh Mahaley's here, and I'd like to, if you'd permit me,
Sure.
I'd like to invite him up to answer that question more specifically than I just have.
Fine.
While he's approaching, what appears to have happened is that it was a larger site and out parcels along River Road were subdivided off and sold, but let me be clear that that's speculation. I haven't researched the title.
Understood.
The question, Josh, is do we need to have 2 points of access?
Yeah. Hello, Commissioner Lennon, members of the Planning Board. I'm Josh Mahaley from Mahaley Land Design. In this case, we were, just as Mr. Frank said, these were within our property lines. So, this is an existing road. We are required to have 2 points of access. One of them at least needs to be an emergency access. So we're looking at this as a secondary access that provides emergency vehicle access, ingress and egress to the site. I don't see this as a primary access for sure. I think most people are going to go out to River Road to the intersection of Independence and make a right or left or go straight across from there. But, the details of that road are still pending, but it is within our property and it is our secondary access, so. I think that.
But if you were to use it as an emergency access, that complies with the code?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's completely.
Any other questions for Mr. Mahaley?
This is Jonathan Guy behind me. Do you have any questions for our traffic engineer about the history of that TIA?
Please.
I have a question. I have a question. In terms of the proposed improvement at the junction of Independence, what is the reality? Are you undertaking this? Are you waiting for River Lights? In simple terms, will you start construction prior to any improvements on that intersection?
So before I answer your ultimate question, let me allow Jonathan to tell you about what the current arrangement is and what the history of studies that lead to that point, and then I'll answer your question about what we're prepared to do.
Thank you.
Jonathan Guy, Kimley Horn.
Please stay close to the, sorry, please stay close to the mic.
Sorry.
Thank you.
There's a lot of history here, dating back to 2006 for this intersection. There's been numerous traffic studies that have been prepared, amendments to that. The current research that I could find does tie the number to 2290 homes, which was the original 2006 number, or the CO of the 229th home, or 10 years after the most recent agreement in 2020. Was the improvement of this intersection. From the get-go of the original 2006 traffic study, which, to be fair, Kimley Horn prepared. I did not, but Kimley Horn out of Raleigh office did prepare that. It called for phase 1 to improve that intersection, both turn lanes and a traffic signal at that location. Additional developments that we've looked at along Independence Boulevard have also considered that improvement as a background improvement. Those were done prior to the 2020 study or update that was done on this. The improvement is needed prior to this development occurring. If it happens or it doesn't happen, the delay is already in 2024, approaching 236 seconds of delay on Independence at River Road. If you look at the volumes that are there, the volumes are associated most likely with growth associated with River Lights. So as the volumes continue to go up, you will see more and more delay regardless if this development is here or not with that. It's interesting when you do look at the history of the volumes, you actually see certain movements decrease over time out there from 2006 up to 2022. Certain movements are decreasing, other movements are increasing. Those movements are most likely associated with development further to the south, coming up, hitting Independence to cut across traffic to either hit Carolina Beach Road or to go to other points north. The movements that you would think would be associated with this have either remained constant or have decreased in volume. So Happy to answer any other questions you might have about traffic, about the study that we prepared. I will briefly say that when we scoped this traffic study with the WMPO and the City of Wilmington, we were asked to look at two different scenarios, both a traffic signal and a roundabout at this location. We were instructed to not consider that as a background improvement, which had been the case in previous traffic studies. That information was shared then that this was associated with the change in the agreement in 2020 for the River Lights development, and we needed to consider that.
Can you say that a different way?
Sure. All of the previous studies that we had done in this area considered a traffic signal in the background, so without the development.
So what does that mean?
That means without the development.
Okay. So that, in other words, the signal's there?
The signal would be assumed to be built or constructed by others, in this case, River Lights.
Okay.
As we approached this traffic study, we were asked to consider looking at the evaluation of both a roundabout at this location and a traffic signal. The traffic study enumerates both of those. We were also told to not consider that as a background improvement. That we would be looking for that to be a build improvement, build meaning associated with this development. The reason for that was the change in the 2020 agreement for the River Lights development and the numbers that I just gave you there with the CO for the 2,290th home or 10 years after that agreement.
So who evaluates in that adjustment? I'm oversimplifying for a reason. Somebody must have thought the intersection was in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. I just want to make it simple.
I think as a matter of clarification, I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the original intersection in the original River Lights development agreement would have been approved as a Phase 1 intersection, which would have been triggered upon the 900th home. And in 2020, I guess River Lights was seeking some rezoning and some incorporation of additional land to the south on the southern end of River Road, and was reshuffling some of their commercial square footage and trading out some residential. And I think they restudied it in 2020, and it moved from 900 to 2290. So that was kind of the history on that.
So
that was in December of.
I'm into simple again. So up until 2020, they said 900 and, sorry, how many?
That was, yeah. And I guess the original development agreement was 2006?
Okay.
Yeah, 2006.
But everybody felt good enough about the intersection to take it up to 2,200? Is that right?
I believe that would be the case.
I know you didn't.
Yeah, I wasn't the applicant at the time, but yes,
Okay.
That's my understanding, having read the
Well, I'm
report.
specifically asking about the MPO because they would have had to have signed off on that, right?
I would presume so.
Okay. Any other questions for the Commissioner Sharp?
I didn't answer Mr. Sharp,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Sharp's question yet, and I don't mean to avoid it. I want to
That's
answer.
fine, I'm waiting.
I appreciate that. Over 2,000 homes in River Lights, many of them single-family homes. 248 multifamily units proposed here. The city has already concluded that at some point on the build-out of River Lights, not only is a traffic improvement at this intersection warranted, but they've made arrangements for a developer to pay for that and cover the cost of construction of it. It doesn't make sense to us that you would compel us to put in an interim traffic improvement. As I understand it, the development agreement with River Lights contemplates a signal, a light. So if we were to install a single-lane traffic circle, as contemplated by the recommendations from the MPO, that would be inconsistent with the improvements that are already set to be installed in approximately 2024, 2025. In preparing that TIA, we had a trip generation of just under 100 trips. In other words, we were just below the threshold that would have required a TIA. The city has the discretion to ask us to do a TIA anyway. You suggested we do it, and we did. That discretion, I believe, is important because I think that that also allows you the option to recommend approval of this zoning without the 8th condition, which is installation of the traffic improvements contemplated in that approved TIA. Understand that that's awkward. The facts in this circumstance, and I typically wouldn't ask for it, but the facts in this circumstance justify it because the traffic improvements for that intersection, without regard to this development, are already queued up and in place, not only to be warranted, but also installed by another party.
When?
When they hit the build-out of 2,290.
And
Which
is
we
there a
can-
prediction on that?
We don't have a number for that, when that will be. We'd need to talk to Newland, who is developing that. We're not the developer for that.
Let me do it another way, okay? So there's a development being proposed here on a project that has merit, okay? And there are a number of citizens who use this intersection on a regular basis. And so if you go there, there is a danger. When you add the fourth leg to the intersection, it increases the danger. People are waiting in line, and you can be on Independence trying to take a left turn, and you can seriously be a good 10, 12, 14 cars back. So while everybody's saying it needs to be done, it's not my job, and someone says, well, the trigger has not arrived, the citizens suffer, and there's a danger. So how would you propose to resolve this? It's like going to dinner and no one wants to pick up the check.
Well, in this case, to follow through with your analogy, that would be a dinner where I had an iced tea and you had a steak. So the proportionate size of the developments that you're considering here that are contributing to the additional traffic on River Road is significantly different. That said, I acknowledge fully what you've described, which is the city has recognized that eventually there will be a traffic problem at this intersection that justifies a change, justifies a physical change, and they've addressed that. We're approaching it somewhere in the middle with an incremental, albeit an impact, but albeit an incremental one. We are prepared to accept, of course, your recommendation of approval of the project with the conditions that staff has proposed, and take up this conversation with council at the next step. But I encourage you to consider whether that makes sense in light of the small impact of traffic of this development, the pending improvements to come, and the inconsistency of the pending improvements to come with the traffic circle improvements that have been recommended here.
To further your analogy, at that dinner, it's kind of like you're vegan and I take you to a steakhouse. Because if I understand correctly, Mr. Guy, the benchmark was moved on the scoping from WMPO.
Correct.
It was changed from historical practices based on the growth of another community.
Correct. There had been a consideration of that off-site improvement up through 2020, and then with this development, that consideration was not there because that horizon year had been moved beyond what was considered to be put in for phase one with River Lights development.
And how recently, from the date of the scoping letter back to the date of the revision of that DA, how much time are we talking about?
Scoping letter was approved this year. Council revised that development agreement in 2020. So it'd be 2 years.
2 years. So all of the issues with this intersection have come up in 2 years. I'm trying to make a point. Okay. So, and to be clear, you did the analysis based on what the WMPO advised you, and it advised you not to include those items in the background.
Absolutely. We're required to follow the guidelines of NCDOT and the WMPO, as well as the City of Wilmington. So our traffic study addresses the concerns. It follows their guidance, and their direction is performed to their specifications. I disagree on the proportional share being lumped, the entirety of this improvement on a single developer. when they're contributing a very small amount of traffic to this overall intersection, when you've got something that's much larger, proportionally speaking, to the south that is contributing to the movements that you're talking about, having trouble with. Left turns. You know, this development's not going to be making a left turn from Independence onto River Road. And so some of the movements that you're experiencing, congestion and delay, we're not adding traffic to, nor would we add traffic to. And so I feel, as a traffic engineer of almost 25 years, we need to look at this from a proportional standpoint, not, you know, unfortunately you're the last person in the door and you get stuck with the bill. This is a big improvement that's been laid upon this developer when there's a much larger development to the south that's continuing to grow and has already agreed to do the improvements. That's where my concern is.
Thank you.
I got to ask the question. So what's River Light's position?
We haven't spoken to him yet.
Duh.
Obviously, there's a lot of complication here, so just to clear it up, and we will, obviously the MPO has a role here, and we will ultimately go with whatever their final recommendation is. We would like to have some conversations with them and, you know, further discuss some of these nuances, but we will do what the MPO asked us to do ultimately with their final approval. We just want to talk through some of these nuances.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, I want to ask you a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Can we, I'm just asking the question, can we vote to recommend without including conditions or one of the conditions?
That's within your purview.
I realize
However,
we're not the final say.
it's not the final say, it'd be a recommendation. I'd ask that you allow Mr. Chambers, if that's something that would be considered, if you'd allow him to make a brief rebuttal statement. I don't know if he wants to or not, but it may change the city's recommendation, but I don't know that for sure.
I don't have so much of a rebuttal. I'd like an opportunity for Mr. Valenikowitz to come up and explain the impact that this development would have on this intersection. I think we all understand that there's an agreement with River Lights, and ultimately the intersection improvement is required by that development. But the change at this intersection, staff has serious concerns, and we'd like to explain those to you.
Okay.
Good evening. My name's Dennis Vilkanowitz. I'm the city traffic engineer. I reviewed the TIA that was prepared for this development. I've been with the city since 2009, so right as River Lights was getting officially approved at their initial TIA is when I came on board. So I've been kind of, I don't want to say in the know, but I know a little bit about some of these dates that may help clear up some of this stuff. January 29th of 2009, the original TIA was approved for River Lights. In that TIA, it specified that River Lights, in their phase 1 improvements of the 900, or I guess the 900 came in later, but their phase 1 traffic improvements was a dual lane roundabout at this intersection. So since 2009, a roundabout's been talked about. Since then, the TIA has been changed, I should say, to a developer agreement. That was done in June of 2009. So 5 months later, it changed from a TIA requirement to a developer agreement with traffic improvements. The same traffic improvements from the TIA. What got omitted somehow, some way, I don't know how, is that the term roundabout was removed from this intersection. It was replaced with, well, I'll rephrase that. The original TIA approval letter suggested a dual lane roundabout if determined feasible. If it wasn't determined feasible, to install a traffic signal. So I think my impression of what happened when the developer agreement was created, The roundabout, everybody just heard traffic signal, so that's what got entered in. So that's what's been talked about, traffic signal, traffic signal, traffic signal, since 2009. As you know, roundabouts have become more and more popular. They're a lot safer. I've got some slides in just a minute that I'll show you, but just to talk about what Jonathan was saying about previous TIAs in this area. If y'all don't know this area, it has been changing quickly. Everybody in the world is building stuff down here. We've done 6 or 7 TIAs along this road for different developments that did or did not happen. So this corridor along Independence Boulevard has been studied tremendously over the last 10, or for the time that I've been here. The 2 previous TIAs that Jonathan mentioned were the conversion of the Woodlands, the Echo Farms golf course. He's right. In both of those TIAs, we asked that TIA to consider this as a traffic signal because the developer agreement had tied that to River Lights. River Lights was responsible for that traffic signal to be installed either at at the time at a certain development level, whether that was 900 or I think 1320 was a number at some point, but over time that number's gone up. So the first Woodlands development was approved in December of 2018, just to give y'all some context of where this went. The next tract of the Woodlands development was approved in October of 2020, and then the developer's agreement was most recently revised January of 21. So that just gives you a timeline to your point of, so this intersection just all of a sudden became a problem. Well, it hasn't been, but all of these things have been studied along the way. In the current developer agreement, it's 2290 residential COs and all of their commercial development, or 10 years. So if I was going to say what's going to happen, it's going to be 10 years. They're not going to reach their occupancy limit residentially and most likely not commercially within 10 years. So we're looking at 2031 before River Lights is responsible for any of this. What I don't know, which might take a little more looking into, I don't think the original River Lights TIA considered the development of this site. They probably considered this intersection as what you see today, a T intersection. There is next to 0 trips coming out of this site. That's my concern from the traffic standpoint. You mentioned once you add that 4th leg, it's almost anything goes, and I've got a slide coming up in just a minute. Can I control that up here, Brian? Okay. What's on the screen before you today is the existing right-of-way, not survey quality, it's just from our GIS layer at the city. I kind of highlighted where the right-of-way is in red. On the next slide, River Lights Development did construct 2 roundabouts along River Road during the realignment. I just picked up one of those and just plopped it down on here to show that a roundabout would fit nicely. It would be an appropriate treatment at this intersection. What's on the screen here, and I agree, it's not oriented correctly, but I was just showing you the scale of what it could look like at this intersection. This is a single lane roundabout. The predominant traffic pattern at this intersection is the northbound right turn from River Road onto Independence Boulevard. And then in the evening, it's the exact opposite. It's Independence Boulevard left turn onto River Road. That's not to say that traffic's not going through the intersection. That's not where all of the traffic's going. It's just where the highest percentage of movements are occurring. River Lights also constructed a dual lane roundabout right across the bridge from here. So this is ultimately what would help this intersection function, not what we're requiring of this developer, but eventually when River Lights meets their needs to do their final improvements along the road, they would be responsible for taking a single lane roundabout to a dual lane roundabout to accommodate the additional traffic from their site and along Independence Boulevard. So I just wanted to show these pictures to kind of show that the scale, the scope, how it could fit, and that it does not impact right-of-way of some other party. This image here comes from some research that is from 2010, just describing the difference between intersections and roundabouts and conflict points. At the top of the screen, you'll see a T intersection, and I've tried to summarize it as best as I could in blue, and it shows the number of potential conflict points or crashes that could occur at a T intersection. So I've totaled that up. There's 3 diverging, 3 merging, and 3 crossing. So 9 total types of crashes could occur at a T intersection. That's what's out there today. If we were to just replace what's out there today with a roundabout, we would only reduce that to 6 total crashes. So when you say, is the intersection safe? It's as safe as it can be right now because it's operating as a T intersection. When that 4th leg gets introduced, as you'll see at the bottom of the screen, the proposed operations, we go from 9 potential vehicle conflicts to 32 potential vehicle conflicts. If it's a stop sign or if it's a traffic signal, either way, we're going from 9 to 32. That's why the requirement to analyze and the requirement to install a roundabout was made, because that only results in 8 potential crashes. So when we were reviewing the TIA, we did ask for a roundabout analysis. We did ask for a traffic signal analysis. Both showed improvements over what's out there today, but the roundabout showed even more improvement and provided the additional safety. In my review of the last 5 years, I looked at all the crashes that occurred here. There have been 7 reported crashes in the last 5 years at this intersection. One of them, no intersection treatment would have helped, a 100-mile-an-hour vehicle. So of the remaining 6 crashes, 5 of them could have been resolved with a roundabout installation, whereas if it were a traffic signal, only 3 of them. Either way, my point is there's not many crashes occurring. Yes, there's volume. Yes, there's a lot of vehicular delay in the evenings and in the mornings, but we're not having the crashes. So operationally, the intersection, it's no fun to go through. I go through it 3 times a day, but it's not unsafe. So our request in this TIA development was they're introducing that 4th leg. They're bringing in all these additional potential conflicts. So why not just install the roundabout and avoid all those additional conflicts? So that I hope that helps explain how we got there and why.
Were you consulted prior to the development agreement being revised?
Yes. I was part of the, I'll say, team to review what was being proposed and revised.
So the 2 prior TIAs you would have been aware of that had these improvements in the background?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm not trying to, me personally, I understand something needs to happen at this intersection. It's just how it changes from orange to red suddenly in the span of a year and a half. And I'm just trying to understand that because my point is, why would you extend the date by which improvements have to be made if you know that there's issues at the intersection? If it's such an issue now.
That's the improvement with the current DA. The previous developer agreements did not have a date in them. They had a unit count. So the current.
Okay, but is it safe to assume there's 900 units at River Lights now?
Yes.
Yeah.
However, all of the commercial has not been developed. So that there's an and.
Which is why you took it out of the subsequent one.
It's still in.
Okay, so with the 10 years.
So the improvement with the current developer agreement is that we did set a firm date. You know, so, and this current developer agreement occurred after those previous TIAs that were done. So once this TIA for Watermark came through, we knew River Lights isn't going to do anything until 2031. So we assumed, what can we do now?
Okay. Just speaking personally, my issue is not with you as much as the process, because it doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem reasonable, as Commissioner Sharp said, that you've got a project which, in my opinion, has merit, and everybody's known for years what's happening on River Road, and suddenly, sorry, you're the last guys here, here's what you got to do. So I don't understand the internal city process and MPO process that allows that to happen without some sort of fair and equitable participation. Anybody else have any other? Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anybody else have any other questions?
And if it's just a couple other statements
Yeah.
that were made, the site drive to that access easement, it was mentioned that it could potentially be an emergency-only access point. In this TIA, 25% of the site traffic was routed along that access point. So I just wanted to note that. And again, I would just have to go back and look to see if River Lights even considered this fourth leg being part of this intersection for their original traffic study. So.
And their first one was done
in 2009.
2009.
Yes.
Okay.
So anyway.
Commissioner Sharp.
Is it anyone's responsibility to look for fairness and equity and approach River Lights? What we're really looking for is the public good. And there have been any number of considerations for River Lights. I think some of us were on the board when they asked for the extension. And it makes sense as things change, the arrangements need to change. And what needs not to get lost is public safety and all the people coming up from River Lights on River Road. The new Harris Teeter will open, that will increase traffic there. People will continue on River Road. There'll be more traffic on that, and now there will be a fourth entrance. So whose responsibility or whose opportunity is it to approach River Lights on the idea of public service and equity?
One of the things that we have talked about at a staff level, and I will ask Mr. Chambers to correct me if I'm wrong, is that we would be happy as the city to convene a meeting between River Lights and the applicant to talk about a potential cost share for this intersection.
Fine. Thank you very much. I think that's a positive step.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, since it came up and the applicant did answer this question, but in case there's any confusion, a development agreement is an agreement between the city and a private party. It takes city council approval to initially approve it and then to make any subsequent amendments to it. So I don't know that it was asked directly, but I think the question came up, what was the process to amend a development agreement? That is the process. It has to be presented to city council and approved by city council, you know, at their regular meetings.
Thank you for that, but on the other side of that, I'm going to change my question, my previous one. We can make a recommendation with a recommendation that staff initiate a meeting with another private company to address the terms of that development agreement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments from commission? Anybody? What's the will of the commission?
would it be appropriate to take a 2 or 3 minute recess and run some potential language past the applicant and the city? Just make sure we're all on the same page.
That's a great idea. We'll be in recess for 3 minutes.
I'm gonna take a picture.
My concern remains, if we add the fourth leg, it's the safety issue. So we need to bring them forward to now.
I know your traffic engineer said that, but it's not truly adding the fourth leg. The fourth leg has always been there. It was fewer
We're
trips.
gonna have to disagree on that. So,
It's in the thing attached to the staff report.
I mean, we just showed a slide that has, it's 32 conflict points compared to.
I'm saying, the TIA, the River Lights TIA that's attached to the staff report, shows it has 4 points of intersection, not 3. Because the marina was there. Remember when River Lights ran the TIA?
It's a safety issue, so I don't know what's right. I mean,
We're putting more trips in, I agree. It went from 34 to 98, and there's 1,000, there's 1,100 coming from the south. You know, it's.
I think the best possible outcome. Advantageous to them to bring their improvement up sooner because it's for the residents, and it will get your project done. Our recommendation changes dramatically if we don't have an improvement. If we have serious safety concerns about it.
How about then for tonight, if the replacement for number 8 is a requirement that the applicant cooperate? That's not my name. I'm just kidding.
Part of the development.
So we're talking about replacing
They're going to have to do it in 10 years.
Not yet.
Nonstop traffic doing this. You got trash trucks going to Arkansas, you got trash trucks going to Waste Management. It's not, it's just not safe. Yeah, I don't know. We're prepared. That's what I don't know how we get there. I want to find a path that gets us to the happy ending where everybody wins. I don't know what that path looks like.
Whatever improvements you want to do. Wants to see, that's what you have our information with this. Y'all think that's fair?
I mean, it's not what we think's fair. I mean, we got two private parties here with two different TIAs and two different agreements. It's pretty complicated. I wish that we could have had a conversation about it, before we get it here and put it in front of a.
Both TIAs have came to the solution, came to the same conclusion as functioning. Our TIA says function, just like everybody else.
Y'all can vote.
I mean, I'm asking for that.
I don't think we're there, as far as agreeing on language. So, I mean, it's
No, but that's why I'm suggesting just remove the condition. And then it has to be. It's still got
That's true. That work. That gives us more time to talk.
And you have our commitment that we're going to work on state legislative.
Sure, certainly.
If we did run and stand up in council.
This is more than the 3 minutes.
Right. Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that, allowing us to have that discussion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. What is the will of the commission? What are you looking for? Good.
What do we need, a motion?
Pardon?
We need a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to put a motion forward that says on agenda item number 2, which is the request of, at 4126 River Road from L1 to MD17. Make a motion to approve this request as it's consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The rezoning would allow additional density along a major road corridor and identified transit route, reduce impervious coverage in an environmentally sensitive area and provide needed transportation improvements. I would also make this motion, when you look at knowing that there are conditions attached to this, that we remove condition number 8 and with the understanding that the staff will go and work with the applicant and other necessary parties to address that condition.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollock has made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Goins has seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. I got it. Commissioner Bowman?
Aye.
Commissioner Goins?
Aye.
Commissioner Lennon votes aye. Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp? Aye. Commissioner Woodruff?
With the understanding and knowing that River Lights has got an obligation to deal with this TIA, I also vote aye.
Thank you. The application with the revision of the removal of condition 8, with the understanding that there will be further staff conversations prior to going to council, is approved unanimously. Yes, sir.
In the next month or two, could we have a report back on how this report of protecting our citizens worked out?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Any other items from the commission? Commissioner Bowman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I should say you did a very fine job. I think this was your first meeting. And of course, JC runs a great meeting, so you're in good company. I'd like to report that this is my last commission meeting after 7 years, and I roll off. And I have heard, at least through the grapevine, that there are other very competent people that have made applications, so that I will be replaced by somebody who will, I'm sure, be worthy. And it's been an honor to work with you and staff as well, Amy and Brian, Jeff, if he's still in the room. It's been a pleasure. I have one request, though, at the right time, if you allow me to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was thinking about this tonight, and I would just say Commissioner Bowman, for me, has always been the E.F. Hutton of the Planning Commission. When you speak, I listen, and you've been a great role model as I've finished up my first year or so. So thank you, and your services will be missed. But I do, yeah, but I got to ask, any items from staff?
That we did send out some training information. If you are interested, please get back to us so that we can register. There is a discount if we register. I think it's more than 5 people. We have to do it simultaneously. We can't submit them separately.
All right.
Vice Chair Lennon, if you'd like, I can provide an update from last night's council meeting for the items that went before the council that this commission voted on last month. 3939 Carolina Beach Road was the straight rezoning from R15 to multifamily. It was the Good Shepherd Ministries agreement that the city's been working with to get some low-cost housing. That was approved by City Council. There were a couple of conditional district rezonings, one on North Carr, one on South Carr, one for duplexes and one for townhomes. Those were both approved. And then the conditional district rezoning on Military Cutoff just north of Sir Tyler for the 21,000 square feet of office space was also approved.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Bowman?
I would like to move to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
We'll do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yay. Enjoy, guys.
Thank you.
Honestly, it's been a pleasure and an honor. I'll see you.
Appreciate your help.